It was Thanksgiving night in a mansion blazing with lights, where laughter and the clink of glasses rose like a luxurious symphony of the wealthy. I, an old mother, sat quietly at the corner of the table, trying not to bother anyone. But in a single clumsy second, a glass of red wine slipped from my hand and bled across my daughter-in-law's pristine white dress, $10,000. Ruined. The entire table went silent. Camila sprang up, shouting, "My God! Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? You just ruined my whole party." Then smack! My son's hand struck my face, right there amid the music and the stunned stares. I stood there without tears, listening to the wine drip onto the floor like the rhythm of a breaking heart. They didn't know that what spilled that night wasn't just wine, but a secret powerful enough to bring them to their knees before me. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Helen Ward, 66 years old, a retired nurse after 35 years at a community hospital in Connecticut. My whole life was bound to the smell of antiseptic, the wail of ambulances, and overnight shifts. I raised Andrew, my only son, with calloused hands and a meager paycheck. When my husband died in an accident, Andrew was 12, and I swore I wouldn't let him lack for anything. I used to think if I worked hard enough and sacrificed enough, my son would grow into a grateful man. But when Andrew became a chief financial officer and married a beautiful, wealthy woman, I slowly realized I was no longer mom in his life. I was just a shadow reminding him of his poor beginnings. I kept pretending to be calm, bringing pumpkin pie every Thanksgiving, telling myself it was enough just to see my son happy. But tonight, when my own child's hand came down on my face in front of a crowd, I understood. There are lines that, once crossed, even a mother's love can't save what's left. I remember every detail of that evening. The Ward's mansion in the suburbs of Greenwich glittered like a luxury hotel. The smell of roast turkey, pumpkin pie, and wine threaded through soft jazz floating from Bose speakers hidden in the walls. On the long table draped in white, candlelight scattered across crystal glasses, sparkling like diamonds. I, Helen Ward, 66, widowed, Andrew's mother, sat at the far end, so distant I had to lean in to catch what anyone was saying. Camila, my daughter-in-law, stood at the head of the table in a snow-white dress, flashing a perfect smile and soft waves of blonde hair. She lifted her glass and spoke in a clear, bright voice. "Andrew bought me this dress from an Italian designer. They only made 3 in the world. The price, well, about $10,000, but worth every penny, right?" Guests applauded, laughter rippled. Andrew sat beside his wife, nodding with pride, squeezing her hand in full view of everyone. The sight made me feel sad and out of place. I looked down at my calloused hands, hands that had steadied hundreds of patients over 30 years as head nurse, now clutching a napkin, afraid a small mistake might stain something that belonged to a world I no longer fit into. When the server poured wine, I smiled, trying to mind my manners, but the lights bouncing off the glass stabbed my eyes. Just 1 second. 1 second of age-shaken tremor and the feeling of being lost in a room without a single honest glance. The glass slipped from my hand. The dark red liquid like blood splashed and then spread across Camila's dress, painting a horrifying streak of crimson over pure silk. Sharp breaths sucked in. No one moved. Camila shot to her feet, eyes blazing. "My God, do you know how much this dress costs? You just ruined my entire party," I stammered. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." My words were cut off by a crack. Smack! Andrew's slap seemed to freeze the whole room. "You're always clumsy," he hissed. "Do you know how many important people are here? You just embarrassed me in front of all of them." I stood paralyzed, hands shaking. In that moment, I couldn't hear voices, only my heart pounding and the wine's faint scent in the air like dried blood. A few guests tried to stifle laughs, others lifted their phones to record, as if watching an expensive bit of entertainment at a high society party. Camila looked me up and down, her voice like ice. "Next time, if you can't hold a glass, do us a favor and don't come." I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. I wanted to say something, but my throat closed up. The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the pain in my chest where my only son had just knocked down the mother who raised him with these hands. I set the glass down, stepped back, and bowed my head slightly. "I'm sorry." No one answered. The music shifted to Fly Me to the Moon, but no one laughed anymore. They just watched me, waiting to see how I would leave. I turned away, kept my back straight, and walked slowly toward the hall. My eyes burned not from tears but from the lights. At my age, I'm used to being forgotten, but you never grow used to being humiliated. As I bent to pick up a napkin that had fallen beside a chair, something small rolled out of Camila's pocket, a silver USB drive. I glanced around. No one noticed. I picked it up and hid it in my palm. It was cold, sharp-edged, but carried a strange feeling as if fate were whispering. I walked past the foyer. Under the Ward's family portrait on the wall, Andrew and Camila smiling, and me at the edge, my hand on my son's shoulder. On the day we took that photo, Camila told me to step back so the light could focus on the newlyweds. I did step back, and from then on, I faded out of the frame of their lives. Outside, the wind slapped my face. Dry leaves swirled over the stone driveway. I opened the trunk of my beat-up car, sank into the seat, my hand still clenched around the USB in my coat pocket. In my head, the slap replayed in waves, along with my son's cold eyes. I started the engine. It coughed to life like the sigh of a tired old soul. The rearview mirror reflected my face, bruised and wrinkled, but my eyes were no longer wet. Something in me had shattered and awakened. On the drive home, city lights smeared red across the windshield, the color of the wine stain. I didn't know what was on that USB, but a gut feeling told me it might be the only weapon I had left. Back at my small apartment in Hartford, I sat down and exhaled a long breath. The wall clock ticked, the wind hissed through the window frame. I took the USB out and set it on the table, staring at it like a door opening over a chasm. I didn't know that in this tiny object hid a secret powerful enough to make the entire Ward family, from a haughty daughter-in-law to an ungrateful son, bow to the woman they had just shamed. And from that moment, I began my fight to reclaim the last thing I still owned, my dignity as a mother. I've lived long enough to know pain doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the very person you once cradled, the one you spent your youth protecting. I started nursing at 21. Mercy Hospital in Hartford was my second home, every day steeped in antiseptic and the clatter of rubber soles racing down white halls. I used to be proud I could stand 14 hours straight, no breaks, no complaints. When my husband, John, died in a car accident, Andrew was 12. I remember the night the police knocked, standing in the rain, hat soaked, and I knew the only thing left of my marriage was the ring on my hand. I didn't cry in front of Andrew. I held him and stroked his hair, telling him everything would be okay. The next day, I put on my white uniform and went back to the hospital like nothing had happened. I didn't have the right to fall apart because I was a mother. In the years that followed, I worked day shifts in the ER, then picked up nights in the recovery unit. Some mornings I got home before dawn, hands shaking with fatigue, but I still made breakfast. Andrew always waited in the kitchen, bright-eyed, showing me a test score or a picture he'd drawn. I used to tell him, "I don't have anything to leave you except opportunity, and I'll do everything to make sure you have it." And I did. When Andrew got into Yale for pharmacology, I could hardly believe my ears. But joy came with fear, tuition, housing, books, all far beyond what I had. I sold the ancestral house my grandparents left me in West Hartford, the home I was born in, where the kitchen always smelled like my mother's apple pie. I remember my hand shaking as I signed the papers, but I still smiled. I told myself, this isn't a loss, it's an investment in my son's future. We moved into a small rental barely big enough for the two of us. I worked myself ragged and sent Andrew extra money every month. When he graduated, I arrived early and sat in the back row wearing the oldest dress I owned. I watched my son in cap and gown, smiling like sunlight, and I thought, it was all worth it. Then he started at a big pharma company in New York. He told me about projects, numbers, meetings I barely understood, but I listened anyway. If his voice sounded happy, my heart felt light. I thought after all those years, I'd finally gotten him to the far shore of life. Then Camila appeared. She was the only daughter of a wealthy healthcare investor, young, sharp, always knowing how to command attention. The first time we met, she reached for my hand with a perfect smile, but her eyes were cold and sizing me up. She said, "I've heard a lot about you from Andrew. You're really strong." I could hear that "you" land with distance, the way people talk about an old story that no longer concerns them. Their wedding was in Manhattan at a top-tier hotel. I was invited, but not to the head table. When the MC introduced the bride's parents and the groom's family, my name was barely mentioned in passing. People clapped. I clapped too, only my palms were icy. I'd hoped Camila would love Andrew the way I always had. But within months, I realized she didn't see me as family. One afternoon when I stopped by to visit, Camila stood on the stairs, voice gentle but razor-edged. "You should give us our space." I'm not used to living around working-class people. I thought I misheard, but Andrew, my son, just stood there with his head down, no defense, not even a sorry glance. I walked out of that house into a cold rain, but nothing felt as cold as inside me. I understood I'd lost my son not to death, but to class a divide I never imagined could split a family. I moved into a small third-floor walk-up in Hartford. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a window overlooking the parking lot. I kept my old habits: morning coffee, reading medical news to keep my mind sharp, waiting for Andrew's call. Some months he didn't call at all. Sometimes he texted, "Mom, you okay?" I replied, "I'm fine," even though I was only fine in the way someone used to loneliness keeps breathing. I still kept up with him from afar through press photos, industry news, their social media, Camila in expensive dresses, Andrew in a tailored suit, smiling among people I didn't know. Sometimes I still baked pumpkin pie and dropped it on their porch. I never got a thank you, but when I saw the box disappear on their security camera, my heart softened a little. Every year on Thanksgiving, I still set a table for one. I bought the smallest turkey and roasted it with rosemary like my mother did. I lit a candle, set my husband's picture on the table, and whispered, "At least you're still here." But this year, when Andrew called and said, "Mom, Camila wants you to come to the party for the sake of appearances," I smiled. I thought it was a small chance to heal. I didn't know it was a trap of fate the night my only son, who once promised to love Mom forever, would slap me across the face at the table. That night back at my apartment, the bruise on my cheek swelled. I looked at myself in the mirror, wrinkled skin, the gray hair, a woman who had saved hundreds of patients but couldn't save her own son's heart. I held an ice pack to my cheek. The sting spread, but the real pain sat in my chest. It wasn't the slap, it was the sense that part of my heart had died. I remembered when Andrew was little, running into my room at midnight afraid of the dark, and I would hold him and say, "I'm here, you're safe." Now I was the one who needed to hear it, and no one said a word. Outside, snow began to fall, flakes settling quietly on the black, cold street. I watched the traffic pass under yellow lights and realized, people can forget the debt they owe to a mother, but time forgets no one. It pays everything back in its own way. I sat in the empty room, listening to the fridge hum and my slow heartbeat. A tear slid down and touched the purple bruise, dissolving like a silent vow. I whispered, "If life is a piece of music, you chose to mute my part. But you'll hear it again soon, and this time, I'll be the one writing the melody." I didn't know that just hours later, when I plugged in the USB I'd picked up, everything would start to change forever. But at that moment, I was still just a mother forgotten, erased from her own story. I sat at my old computer, the one Andrew bought me over 10 years ago when he was in grad school. The screen was cloudy, the keys heavy, the fan whirring like an old soul's sigh. I slid the silver USB into the port and heard a small click in the quiet room. My heart thumped, as if I were breaking into a world not meant for me. A folder appeared. No photos, no videos, just Excel sheets and PDFs with dry file names. Trans, reports, June, XLSX. Confidential, accounts, Europe, PDF. Internal, fund, transfer, records, XLS. I opened one at random. Columns of numbers filled the screen, rows stretching forever. Even after years away from the hospital, my mind was still sharp for irregularities. Monthly transfers appeared from an account labeled Ward Pharmaceuticals Research Fund to a string of accounts overseas in Switzerland, Luxembourg, and one unfamiliar name, Velasca Medical Holdings. I frowned. That research fund belonged to Andrew's company. I remembered Andrew once said, "Mom, I'm running a cancer drug research fund. Camila handles the finances, she's got an MBA. But those sums weren't small, over $2 million in 6 months. I opened more files. There were piles of documents signed Camila Ward, CFO, along with transaction records tagged with security codes. A hidden folder named Private contained stock transfer contracts and internal emails between Camila and a familiar name, Vincent Devereaux, CEO of Velasca Pharmaceuticals, Andrew's direct competitor. One terse, icy email made my blood run cold. Once the shares are transferred, Velasca will merge. My family will take control. Andrew doesn't need to know until it's too late. I held my breath, feeling like I'd just read my son's death sentence. Each word was a blade. Camila hadn't just betrayed Andrew, she was quietly destroying his entire company to sell it to her own family. I pushed back from the desk, heart racing. In my mind, the wine-soaked white dress flashed again. What was ruined was worthless compared to what she was doing, and my son's slap, only the result of a perfectly staged scene directed by Camila. I sat still, the screen glowing. I couldn't take this to Andrew. If Camila could deceive at this level, she surely controlled all his channels of information. I needed someone who could bring the truth into the light carefully. The first name that came to mind was Clara Vaughn. Clara had been an investigative reporter at the Boston Globe. 10 years ago, she was in a car accident and brought to my hospital. I was on the night shift. I personally helped save her life after emergency surgery for massive blood loss. After that, Clara would send thank you cards every Christmas, but we lost touch for years. I looked up her old number in my contacts. My fingers shook as I dialed. 3 rings. Then a familiar female voice came on. Clara Vaughn speaking. I took a deep breath. "Clara, this is Helen Ward, the head nurse at Mercy who cared for you after your accident in 2013. There was a brief silence, then her voice warmed, cautious but kind. "Helen." "Oh my God, I still have your thank you card. How are you? What's going on?" "Clara, I need to talk to you, not about medicine. It's about financial crimes, and maybe my son's life." She went quiet for a few seconds. I heard the scratch of a pen. "Where are you?" "A small apartment in Hartford. I have data, evidence, but I don't know what to do." Clara's voice dropped, serious. "Do not send anything online. Don't tell anyone, not even family. I'll arrange someone to meet you. And Helen, stay quiet. We need more proof." After the call, I sat still for a long time. The room suddenly felt colder, with only the pale blue from the screen reflecting on my face. I understood that from this moment on, I wasn't the humiliated old mother anymore. I was stepping into a dangerous game, one where I had to face my daughter-in-law, someone smart and ruthless enough to make my son believe she was an angel. I opened a drawer and took out another USB drive. I backed up all the data onto it and labeled it with a marker, "Financial Reports, Hidden." Then I grabbed my coat, slipped the original USB into an envelope, and drove out. A light rain fell over Hartford that night. Streetlights scattered across the wet pavement like shards of broken glass. I drove to the office of attorney George Miller, an old friend of my husband's. George had been corporate counsel for the hospital, careful, discreet, and principled. When John died, George handled the probate, and I always knew he kept a private safe at his office. By the time I arrived, the clock read 10 p.m. The lights were still on. George opened the door, eyes wide. "Helen? My God, it's been over 10 years. What's going on?" I took off my hat. My raincoat was soaked. "I need you to hold something important. Don't ask, just put it in your safe and don't open it unless I say so." George studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I owe your husband a favor. I'll do it." I set the envelope on his desk. "If anything happens to me, send this to Clara Vaughn at the Boston Globe." Worry flickered in George's eyes, but he didn't press. He opened the safe, placed the envelope in a separate compartment, locked it, then squeezed my shoulder. "You're as strong as ever, Helen, but be careful. Their world is nothing like ours." I gave a tired smile. "I know, but sometimes it's the outsiders who see whose hands are truly dirty." Back home, I flipped on the kitchen light and made a cup of chamomile tea. Outside, the rain kept falling. On the table, the second USB lay still, catching the warm glow from the little lamp. I thought about Andrew. Did he have any idea that the wife he trusted was cutting away, day by day, at everything I'd spent my life helping him build? I pressed a hand to my cheek, where the bruise had started to change color. The ache was still there, but this time, I didn't feel weak. I felt clear. Amid the rain and the rising steam, an idea took shape. I wouldn't call the police. I wouldn't make noise. I would strike back on my terms. I opened my old notebook and wrote a few lines. November 25th. Begin. No longer the weak mother, no longer the one who gets slapped. Then I closed the notebook, set it beside the USB, and shut my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt the trembling inside me go still. Only a fire remained low but steady burning. And I knew that from that night on, nothing in the Ward family would ever be the same. Because this time, the forgotten old mother had found her voice, and it would silence them all. The next morning, I woke as the first sunlight slipped through the curtains. The small room was awash in winter's pale gold, so quiet I could hear the clock hands crawl. On the table, last night's tea was still warm, and the USB beside it sat like a reminder that everything had begun to change. But in the midst of all the planning, one thought wouldn't leave me, Sophie, my granddaughter. She was only 8, with star-bright brown eyes, the only one in that house who had ever hugged me without it being for show. I remembered mornings I took her to preschool, how she'd sit on my lap in the back seat, singing little songs and asking, "Grandma, why is your hair white but you're still my favorite to hug?" I used to think a child's love was the purest thing, and I couldn't believe even that love had been bent by Camila. Around late morning, I decided to drive to Andrew's house. I had no grand plan, just wanted to drop off some homemade cookies for Sophie, like I did on weekends. I figured no matter how much Camila despised me, a child still had a right to be loved. The road to their private community ran up a hill between 2 rows of bare maples, a high iron gate with an automated security system where outsiders had to buzz and wait for approval. I carried a carefully wrapped bag of cookies in my tote, wearing an old gray coat and the wool scarf Sophie had knitted for me at 6. I rang the bell. A soft beep sounded. Then the guard's voice crackled through the speaker. "Can I help you?" "This is Helen Ward," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Andrew's mother. I'm here to see my granddaughter, Sophie." A pause. Then a curt reply. "Sorry, Mrs. Ward, you're not on today's guest list." I faltered. "I won't stay long, just want to drop off some cookies." "I'm her grandmother, you know that." The guard's voice was flat, mechanical. "I only follow instructions. Please leave, or I'll have to contact the homeowner." I clenched the handles of the basket, swallowing the humiliation rising in my throat. Then the inner wooden door swung open. Camila stepped out in a cream silk dress, blonde hair falling loose, a coffee cup in hand. She didn't look surprised. She only curled her lips slightly, voice sweet as sugar, but each word falling like ice. "Oh, Mrs. Helen, you still don't get it? We don't want our daughter growing up around clumsy people." Each word squeezed my throat. "Camila, I just want a few minutes with Sophie. I'm her grandmother." She shrugged, eyeing the cookie bag like it was dirty. "Grandmother? That's funny. Someone who spilled wine on her mother's dress and made her father lose face in front of dozens of guests. Do you think she'd be proud of you? Andrew's trying to keep our reputation intact. Don't make it harder." I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Andrew appeared behind her. My son wore a gray suit, phone in hand, face blank. Our eyes met for a split second. I wanted to see mercy, a flicker of regret, but there was only emptiness. Camila murmured, just loud enough for me to hear, "Say something." Andrew took a breath, and without a word shut the gate. The clang of iron sounded like a verdict. I stood there holding the basket, my heart heavy as stone. A cold gust lifted the scarf around my neck, the one Sophie knit for me. She'd said, "So you won't be cold waiting at the school gate." Now I was still at a gate, but hers and I was cold to the bone. I turned the car around without looking back. The descent blurred in mist. The tires slid a little over dry leaves. Each yard I drove felt like a year taken off my life. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, letting the moon spill a thin silver over old keepsakes, Andrew's graduation photo, my 25 years of service plaque, and the wooden box of old files I'd kept in the closet for years. I opened the box. Inside were the traces of a life given to a son, Yale tuition bills, the savings account I emptied to cover his first loan, and the mortgage papers for the ancestral house I signed with a shaking hand. I turned each page, the smell of old paper mixed with dust and tears. Every number was a witness to 14-hour days, skipped meals, sleepless nights so Andrew could build a career. Ward Pharmaceuticals, the company he ran, wasn't just his ward. It was mine. It was sweat, tears, and the youth I traded away. I set the stack down, my fingers whitening at the edges. A sharp feeling rose, not humiliation anymore, but clarity. I had been erased from the legacy I helped create. I had been pushed out of the home these hands once built. But now, with the evidence on that USB, I knew I still had one thing they didn't: the truth. I took the USB from the drawer and plugged it in again. This time, I opened each file, reading slowly, marking key points. I wasn't trembling anymore. All the fear had cooled into resolve. A little after 11 p.m., I picked up the phone and called Clara. Her voice came through a bit hoarse, probably still at the office. "Helen, I was just about to call you. I reviewed the copies you sent. This is bigger than I thought. If it holds, Camila is committing international money laundering." I was silent for a moment, then answered, "You're right. But I don't want to destroy the company, I just want the truth seen. I want Andrew to know who he's living with." Clara's voice went low. "Then we need a careful release. No fireworks, or Camila will have time to scrub the matter. Trail." I glanced at the moonlight spread across the paper-laden table and said slowly, every word clear, "Clara, I've already lost everything. My name, my son, my family. All I have left is Ward. It's time they learn what that name truly stands for." Silence on the line. Then Clara's voice, steady and firm. "Okay, Helen. We'll do it your way." After hanging up, I stared at the computer a long while. The transaction sheet still filled the screen columns of numbers like heartbeats. I knew each line was another cut Camila had made into my son's trust. I printed everything, sealed it in an envelope, and carefully taped it shut. In the corner, I wrote with a slightly shaky hand, "Ward. Truth." Then I leaned back and took a deep breath. Outside, the rain turned soft, but to me it sounded like an overture. I knew the road ahead would be hard. Camila was clever. Andrew was blind. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. Because now I had something they couldn't buy, steal, or stamp out: the truth and a mother's resolve. I closed my eyes, listened to the rain tapping the eaves, and told myself, they shoved me from their door, but I'll return, not to beg my way in, but to knock on the door of justice. And so, in the quiet winter night, my plan to strike back officially began, not with violence, not with hate, but with the light of truth. In the days after, the air in my apartment grew quieter than ever. Everything looked the same, the old clock ticking in slow beats, the teapot still holding a whisper of chamomile, but inside me, a low fire burned. Not wild, not flaring, just spreading like banked embers waiting for a breath. Clara went to work. She said little, but I knew she worked day and night. I received short, coded texts. "I'm tracking the money. Found 2 intermediaries. Don't use email." Clara was the kind of person I always trusted. Calm, sharp, and relentlessly ethical. I understood that behind each brief message were hours of digging, verifying, and maybe danger. As for me, I played my part, pretending to be weak. I handwrote a letter to Camila. My script shook like that of a truly apologetic old mother. "Camila, I know I embarrassed you at the Thanksgiving party. I won't make excuses. I only hope you'll forgive me. If possible, I just want to see Sophie, even for a few minutes. I promise not to bother you or Andrew again. Thank you for letting me keep the Ward name. Helen." I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and mailed it. I knew Camila well. Someone like her wouldn't miss a chance to flaunt power, especially when she believed the other person had knelt. 3 days later, I received a reply. The paper smelled of expensive perfume. Every letter was carefully formed. "Mrs. Helen, I received your letter. But you misunderstand. We don't forgive people who damage our family's reputation. If you truly want to make amends, do the right thing. Stay silent. And instead of thanking us for allowing you to keep the Ward name, you should be grateful we still let you have it. Camila Ward." I finished reading and set the letter on the table. I wasn't angry. I simply smiled, the smile of someone who finally sees the other's true nature. She still thought she was winning, and I, with all the calm I had, let her believe it. While Camila reveled in her sense of control, Clara followed the money. She uncovered dozens of transactions routed through a shell company in the Cayman Islands, all authorized by Camila under the label International Research Investments. But what stunned Clara was that those accounts matched a chain tied to Velasca Pharmaceuticals, the very competitor Camila was colluding with. I remember the day Clara called, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and tension. "Helen, we've got it all. Forged contracts, money laundering transfers, even emails between Camila and Vincent. We just need one final confirmation from an inside source, and we're set." I was quiet for a moment, then answered softly, "Good. But be patient a little longer. Let them think I've forgotten everything." In the days that followed, I lived as usual: morning coffee, afternoon walks around the lake, evening news on TV. But inside, I was counting down. I knew Clara was preparing the exposé, and when she told me the title, my heart clenched. "The White Queen of Ward Pharmaceuticals." A perfect headline, regal and cold, just like Camila. Clara said the piece would run after legal review, and the editorial team at the Boston Globe was keeping it strictly confidential. I only nodded and said quietly, "Do it." No concessions. About 2 weeks later, a brief phone call made my heart race. "Andrew was just summoned by the IRS," Clara said. "They found anomalies in the research fund and are asking him to cooperate." Camila was with him, but she didn't look good. I think she's starting to get scared. I sat still for a long time, teacup in hand. Dim light fell through the window and shimmered on the ripples in the cup. I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else, no one can outrun the truth forever. I didn't want Andrew to suffer, but some lessons can only be learned by losing everything. The son who slapped me over a dress was about to learn what a real stain looks like. That afternoon I called Clara. My voice was low, steady as a lake before a storm. "It's time, Clara." "Start." "On the other end," she said. "I understand." The call ended short, like a vow. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. A thin veil of clouds signaled rain. I made coffee, opened my computer, and saw my inbox flooded with alerts from the Boston Globe, Reuters, Bloomberg. A bold headline filled the screen: "The White Queen of Ward Pharmaceuticals, behind the curtain of a billion-dollar lie." The cover image was Camila, in a glamorous white dress, a sweet smile with cold eyes. Below were documents, charts, evidence, and email threads she sent to the Velasca group. Clara had done a flawless job, enough facts, solid proof, and not a single error. Social media exploded. The pharmaceutical world reeled. Ward Pharmaceuticals stock plunged. Major outlets ran the story, while the name Camila Ward flooded every front page as a symbol of betrayal and greed. I sat still, watching the lines of text scroll by. Outside, rain began to fall, each drop tapping the window frame like justice knocking at the door. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt lighter, as if a weight had finally lifted off my chest after years of pressure. On the table, Camila's handwritten letter still lingered, the perfume faint but present. I picked it up, folded it neatly, and fed it to a burning candle. The paper curled, caught, and the ink turned to ash. I spoke softly, calm and even. "Thank you, Camila. Without your contempt, I might never have found myself again." I still remember the moment the flames swallowed that letter, no bitterness left, only peace. What about you? If it were you, would you be brave enough to burn the past that hurt you? Share your thoughts below. I want to know whether you would choose forgiveness or silence. Outside, the rain grew heavier, but inside me, that hidden fire burned brighter, stronger, and now nothing could put it out. The next morning when I got out of bed, the world seemed different. Not because of the weather, but because of the dense headlines on every page. I poured a cup of coffee, turned on the TV, and the first thing I saw crawling across the screen was Ward Pharmaceuticals, suspected of money laundering and stock fraud. The FBI officially involved. The anchor's voice was even, but icy. Internal sources report illicit financial transactions spanning over a year, linked to research funds and international share transfers. The suspected mastermind is Camila Ward, Chief Financial Officer and wife of CEO Andrew Ward. I watched the footage: Camila in a white suit hurrying out of a building, 2 investigators flanking her. Camera flashes popping nonstop. The once sleek blonde hair now in disarray, a carefully made-up face gone pale under the lights. She tried to smile, but fear had already taken her eyes. I took a deep breath, tightening my grip on the mug. Everything was moving faster than I'd imagined. An empire once praised as a model of the industry was collapsing in a matter of days. Online, people shared the images of Camila being escorted out, some mocking, some shocked, some saying, "In the end, justice always finds the right address." As for me, I just sat there, watching headline after headline, my heart aching and easing at the same time. Andrew appeared in the next segment. He wasn't arrested, but he was summoned to cooperate. Seeing my son's face on the screen made my heart twist pale, exhausted, stripped of his usual confidence. His eyes drifted when a reporter asked, "Did you know anything about your wife's transactions?" Andrew only shook his head and hurried into the car without answering. I knew that in that moment, the reputation he had spent years building was melting away like sea foam. That afternoon, Clara called me. "The news is moving faster than we expected," she said, her voice hoarse after long hours. "The press is tracking every step. But brace yourself, Helen. Camila will come for you." I listened to the rain ticking against the window. "She won't back down, will she?" "No," Clara said. "Someone like Camila doesn't understand losing. When everything slips away, she'll look for someone to blame, and that someone will be you." I gave a faint smile. "I'm ready." Sometimes silence is the best armor. That night, I left the TV off. I sat in the living room with only the table lamp on. Warm, dim light settled over the small space, quiet as a lake before a storm. Then the phone rang. On the screen was a name I didn't think I'd see again, Camila Ward. I let it ring a few more beats before answering. Her voice came through hoarse, still trying to sound haughty. "You think you've won, Helen?" I didn't reply. I only listened to her ragged breathing. "You think a few papers and numbers can destroy me? You have no idea what I can do. If I go down, Andrew goes down with me. I'll drag him under." Her voice shook rage and desperation. I set down my teacup and answered slowly, each word clear. "Camila, I didn't strike you. I only removed the mask so the light could shine in. You're the one destroying yourself." Silence on the other end. Then a dry laugh like breaking glass. "Light, huh? You don't get it, Helen. Light can burn the weak like you." "I used to be weak," I said quietly, "but only when I believed you had a heart." I hung up. The room fell quiet again, the steady rain drumming on the roof. I sat there a long time. In the dark, I caught my reflection in the window, silver hair, deep eyes, a face lined with age but strangely serene. I was no longer the woman slapped at a dinner table. I had become someone who could look straight at the truth without trembling. The next morning, Clara called back. "You were right," she said, her voice moved and impressed. "I listened to the recording you sent. What you said is powerful. The editors want to use it for a special interview on the case. Do you agree?" I was surprised. "A recording? You recorded that call?" "Yes. I had our security system automatically capture any suspicious communications. And Helen, your line cut through the dark like a knife." I was quiet for a moment, then nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "If it helps people understand that truth is never the enemy, then do it." 2 days later, the interview went live. The cover showed my friend face, an older woman with a steady gaze over the bold headline, "I didn't strike anyone. I only removed the mask so the light could shine in." Helen Ward. That line swept across social media. Thousands of comments appeared. "She's a role model for everyone who's been silenced. You don't need power. Truth alone can bring liars down." I read the messages, and a familiar yet strange feeling rose, not pride, but peace. I'd worked in a hospital all my life, seen so many life and death moments, but never as clearly as now. Sometimes justice doesn't need a shout, just the patience of light. That afternoon, I stepped onto the porch and saw the rain had stopped. The clouds split, revealing a silver-gray sky after the storm. A few kids biked past laughing, unaware that somewhere an empire had fallen. In my coat pocket was the old letter from Camila, the part that hadn't burned. I pulled it out and dropped it into the rainwater along the curb. The paper drifted, bled out, and disappeared. I spoke softly, to myself or maybe to my late husband. "John, do you see? In the end, the truth still finds its way." A light breeze carried the smell of wet earth and a hint of wildflowers. I lifted my head, feeling my heart grow lighter, not because I'd won, but because justice had breathed again after years underground. And I knew my journey wasn't over, but at least tonight, I could sleep no longer afraid of the dark, because I had learned to light myself. Rain had started in mid-afternoon, the heavy, stubborn kind of an East Coast winter. Drops drummed against the old window frame, each tap like a knock from memory. I sat in the living room, tea going cold, watching streaks of water slide down the glass. Inside, Everything had settled after days of chaos news, headlines, Camila's call fading into a quiet that mixed with fatigue. I thought the evening would pass like any other until there was a knock at the door. 3 hard, urgent raps, louder than the rain on the porch. I startled. I rarely had visitors at this hour. I stood, pulled on a sweater, and opened the door. There, in the white curtain of rain, Andrew stood before me. His shirt was soaked, hair a mess, eyes red. Rain beat against his shoulders, no umbrella, no words, just standing there. I let out a slow breath, my hand still on the knob. "Andrew." He looked up, his voice raw. "Mom, how could you do this? How could you destroy my work?" I went still. That question, that tone, dragged me back to Thanksgiving night, the same voice, the same coldness, when his hand came down on my face. But this time, his eyes weren't proud. They shook, like a lost child finding his way home. I spoke slowly, low but firm. "No, Andrew, I didn't destroy anything." I pulled down the curtain. "You let someone else destroy your own name." He shook his head and stepped inside. "You don't understand, Mom. The whole company, hundreds of people work under me. Now everything's collapsing. My shares are wiped out. The press is swarming. What am I supposed to do?" "You're asking the wrong person." I turned away, walked to the table, and set a dry towel in his hand. "You should be asking why the wife you keep protecting is the one who pushed you to this point." Andrew tossed the towel onto the chair, voice rising. "Camila says you hate her. You want revenge. You gave fake documents to the press." I turned back and looked him straight in the eye. The warm lamplight hid his face pale, exhausted, still clinging to blind belief. "Andrew, all these years you've never asked me one honest question. You only listen to what others say about me. Now let me ask you, do you truly believe Camila is innocent?" He stayed quiet, but his eyes wavered. I stepped closer, softening my tone. "Son, you used to trust data, evidence, numbers, right? Then look at this." I opened the drawer, took out the backup USB drive, and set it on the table. Its silver glint caught the light. Everything is in here. Forged contracts, transfers, correspondence between Camila and the Velasca Group. All of it. I kept a copy because I knew one day you'd need it. Andrew looked at the USB, his hand trembling slightly. "Mom, how did you get it?" I gave a sad smile. "On Thanksgiving night when you slapped me, I bent to pick up the napkin and saw it fall from Camila's purse. Maybe fate chose me to open your eyes." He picked up the USB, still doubtful. But I could see a flicker of fear, the kind that comes when someone starts to see the truth. "You can look at it here. No one's going to hurt you." Andrew sat down and plugged the USB into his laptop. The screen lit up. I stood quietly in the corner, listening to the rain outside blend with the soft clicks of his mouse. The small room filled only with my son's heavy breathing each time he opened another file. He opened the first email, "Camila to Vincent Devereaux," signed, "He didn't suspect a thing." Next came the share transfer agreements, hidden transaction sheets, lists of foreign accounts. All carried Andrew Ward's digital signature. I saw his shoulders shake. "No, no way. She told me these were just research collaboration proxies." Andrew's voice faltered, his eyes widened, his face drained. He scrolled faster, then stopped. On the screen was a note. "His mother is old. When this is done, I'll put her in a luxury nursing home in California. She can be happy there without bothering anyone." Andrew gripped the mouse, let his hand fall limp, then shot to his feet. My God, I saw the first drop hit the keyboard, whether a tear or rain from his still wet shirt. I couldn't tell. "Mom," he rasped, "she made me sign. She said it was just tax procedure. I didn't read closely. God, how foolish I've been." He dropped to his knees in front of me, his choking sobs, blended with the rain outside. "I'm sorry, Mom. I shamed you. I hurt you and myself. I don't deserve forgiveness. I looked at my grown son, the pride of my life now, a lost child again. The anger in me melted away, leaving only a deep, aching tenderness. I crouched, placed my hand on his shoulder, and whispered like a breeze, "Son, now do you know how much that slap hurt?" Andrew looked up, eyes flooded. "I do, Mom. It's not just physical pain. It's when the person you love most shatters your heart." I nodded and pulled him into my arms. His body shook, like the little boy who once fell off his bike, and I bandaged his knees. I caught the familiar warmth, his hair scented with rain and tears. "It's okay," I whispered. "What matters is you woke up." Outside, the rain kept falling, but it no longer felt heavy. The warm light in the room softened, reflecting across our faces. I knew there would be long days ahead, investigations, court, the media, but in that moment, I felt at peace. The son I thought I'd lost had come back not in glory but in truth. I smoothed Andrew's hair and murmured, "Now stand up. The rain will stop, and we're still mother and son." He squeezed my hand and nodded. Looking out the window through the still steady rain, I saw not two broken people in the glass, but two souls who had found each other again in the storm. The morning of the first hearing arrived with a knife-edged January cold. I woke early, poured a cup of coffee, and sat quietly watching gray clouds slide past the window. The air in my apartment was thick, tense, and still the hush before a wave I knew was coming today. When I stepped into the federal courthouse in Hartford, the air held polished wood and fresh ink. People moved slowly. Every footstep echoed off the stone walls. The courtroom was packed with reporters, cameras, lawyers, and onlookers. Every eye was on the woman in the defendant's chair, Camilla Ward. She was still beautiful, though visibly worn down. The familiar white suit only made her skin look paler. Under harsh lights, heavy makeup couldn't hide the dark circles or ashen lips. But her gaze hadn't changed, arrogant, icy, refusing to lose. I sat in the third row behind the barrier, facing her. Andrew sat beside me, hands clenched, occasionally trembling. I laid my hand over his, the way I used to when he was little and afraid of shots. The judge entered. The gavel struck. This court convenes to try the defendant, Camilla Ward, on charges of money laundering, falsifying financial records, and corporate corruption. Court is in session. The prosecutor read the indictment. His voice was even, but each sentence cut the air. The defendant used her position as chief financial officer to execute more than 43 illegal transactions, transferring nearly $18 million to offshore accounts through Ward Pharmaceuticals Research Fund. Additionally, the defendant forged contracts and coerced her husband to sign authorizations to legitimize the scheme. Behind us, cameras flashed non-stop. Camilla sat straight-backed, chin lifted, lips slightly curled as if every accusation were a joke. Then her attorney stood, voice clear and brimming with confidence. "Your Honor, this entire case is the product of personal malice. Mrs. Helen Ward, my client's mother-in-law, fabricated and altered documents to smear Camilla due to family conflict. We have proof that Mrs. Helen supplied information to reporter Clara Vaughn, who published a story that severely damaged Ward's reputation." Whispers rippled through the room. I kept my eyes on Camilla. She turned, looked at me, and let a cold smile pass her lips. "See, everyone knows you hate me. You're just a jealous old mother, bitter about her daughter-in-law's life." I didn't answer. George Miller, an old friend and my attorney, stood. He nodded to the judge and stepped to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor, we present rebuttal evidence. Please play the video from the USB provided by my client, Mrs. Helen Ward." The room dimmed as the large screen came on. A clear recording appeared. Camilla in her office, signing a stack of documents. A date stamp in the corner. June 15th of last year. Next, security footage from the company's mail server emails sent from camila.ward@wardpharma.com with detailed instructions for international research reinvestment transfers. George turned back to Camila. "Do you deny these are your signatures and your emails?" Camila said nothing, her face draining. Then she shot to her feet, snapping, "I was set up, the video is edited. My mother-in-law has hated me for years, she fabricated everything." The judge motioned her to sit. George continued, "Your Honor, we also have a witness." He looked toward the gallery. "Andrew Ward, please." Andrew stood. I noticed his hands tremble, but his eyes were steady. He took the oath, then faced the bench. "I'm Andrew Ward, CEO of Ward Pharmaceuticals. I confirm that what the court saw is real." My wife, Camila, asked me to sign contracts she described as administrative paperwork. I didn't read them carefully. My mother discovered the irregularities, gathered the evidence, and contacted a reporter to investigate. Without her, the company and I would have been destroyed. The courtroom fell silent. I saw Camila's lips pressed tight, her jaw shaking. A reporter snapped furiously, flashes popping across the room. The judge looked toward the gallery. "Mrs. Helen Ward, the court thanks you for supplying evidence that brought this to light. Do you wish to say anything?" I stood. My voice was low and steady, but it carried through the hush. "I don't want anyone to suffer, not even Camila. I only want the truth to be seen. When truth is buried, trust dies with it." A few heads bowed. I spotted Clara in the last row, eyes wet but bright. The judge brought down the gavel. "The court finds the defendant, Camila Ward, guilty of money laundering, falsifying financial records, and corporate corruption. Sentence: 12 years in prison, forfeiture of all illicit assets, and a ban from holding any financial office in any organization for 20 years. The words rang out, bouncing off the walls. The room stirred. Cameras flashed again. Camila sat frozen for a few seconds, then let out a brittle laugh. As two officers approached, she stood, hair falling across her face, a twisted smile on her lips. She turned to me, voice raw. "You won, Helen. Are you satisfied now?" I looked at her for a long time. No anger, no grudge, only a young woman consumed by her own ambition. I answered softly, loud enough to carry through the stillness. "No, Camila, I didn't win. Only the truth did." She stumbled, eyes flickering. Then they led her away. When the courtroom doors closed, I stayed seated, listening to the footsteps fade. Andrew sank into the chair beside me, head bowed. I placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling his warmth for the first time in years. "Mom," he whispered, voice tight, "thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled, looking up at the skylight where light filtered through. "Son, I never wanted to beat anyone. I just wanted you to learn one thing. Truth always finds its way, even if it has to walk through hell." Outside, snow began to fall. White flakes drifted past the window and melted on the cold wood frame. I breathed in, letting the chill fill my chest, and felt myself ease. After so many years, justice finally had a voice. Not a shout, just the quiet of people who have found peace in the truth. In the days after the hearing, the city seemed to slow. Hartford's sky wasn't as bleak, snow-blanketed roofs and streets, making everything strangely calm. But inside me was a vague, empty space, a feeling of release mixed with ache. Maybe no one truly wins after a war inside a family. One morning, as I was making coffee, the mailman knocked. He handed me a cream envelope with neat, careful handwriting I recognized at once. "Andrew." I stood a long time just looking at it. It had been years since my son wrote me a letter by hand. I opened it. The smell of fresh paper blended with the coffee. "Mom, I don't know where to start." Any apology now feels small. I lived too long in the shadow of my pride and lost what mattered most, your trust and your love. I don't dare ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm trying to make things right. I've resigned from the company, sold the house in Greenwich, and I'm looking for a small apartment near Sophie's school to start over. I want to teach her to live by conscience, not by reputation. You once said the worst pain isn't the slap, it's when the person you love turns away. Now I understand that better than anyone. If possible, I ask for one chance to make amends, even if it's just to visit you once and apologize in person. Your son, Andrew. The lines blurred with tears. I set the letter down and pressed a hand to my chest. Something inside me cracked and healed. I didn't sob, just let the tears fall slowly, like coffee drops hitting the bottom of a cup, strong, hot, real. I sat by the window watching the snow melt in the Sunday. The letter lay on the table. I read it again and again until I knew every curve of his handwriting. Then I folded it, put it in a drawer, and didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I wanted Andrew to walk his path on his own. Forgiveness isn't a sentence, it's a long enough silence for someone to learn to understand. A few days later, Clara called. Her voice was bright like morning light. "Helen, have you seen the news? My new piece is on the front page of the New York Times today. The title is The Mother Who Fought Back." I froze. The mother who fought back? Yes. Clara laughed. I have no idea how many people you've inspired. The whole country is talking about you. I've never seen so many letters and emails of thanks. I opened my computer. The screen lit up with an old photo of me in a hospital corridor, white nurse uniform, hair in a bun, a tired face with bright eyes. Below was the bold headline, "The woman who stood up when the world told her to be quiet." I read Clara's lines. Helen Ward had no power, no wealth, no fame. She had one belief, that truth, even when buried under layers of lies, will find the light. She didn't fight for vengeance. She fought to reclaim her dignity, and for every woman who's been dismissed and pushed to the margins. The peace spread fast. I received hundreds of letters, emails, and messages from everywhere. California, Texas, Florida, even far-off rural towns. An elderly woman named Marjorie wrote, "I'm 72. I lived my whole life in the shadow of my husband and my children. But after reading your story, I stood up and went to the bank to open my first account." Another woman, Mrs. Thompson in Tennessee, included a photo of herself smiling and holding the lawsuit she filed against her son for taking her property. She wrote simply, "Because of you, I know I'm not crazy." I was just silent for too long. I read every letter, some scrawled, some shaky with age, and some with only one sentence. "Thank you, Helen." Each line felt like another heartbeat syncing with mine, women I'd never met, sharing the same pain and the same journey to find themselves again. That night, I opened my old journal, the one I used to write in during overnight shifts at the hospital. The paper had yellowed, the cover was worn, but the ink still carried a faint scent. I picked up a pen and wrote my first lines in years. March 14th. I used to be a nurse. I used to be dismissed, yelled at, ordered around like I was invisible. But today, I am Helen Ward, the woman who reclaimed her own dignity. I didn't defeat anyone. I just stood up in a world that kept telling me to sit down. And now I understand. The greatest victory isn't making someone fall, it's learning to stand firm without asking anyone's permission. I set the pen down and looked at the page where the ink was still wet. Outside, the snow had stopped, and a light breeze carried in the damp scent of earth and wood. I closed the journal, leaned back in my chair, and shut my eyes. In the dark of that small room, faces rose up: my husband, Andrew, even Camila, people who had passed through my life, leaving wounds but also lessons. And I knew everything that happened had led me here, not a woman shaking in the echo of someone else's derisive laughter, but someone who knows the value of silence, resolve, and truth. Late that night, I stepped onto the balcony. Moonlight stretched across the snow, reflecting softly through the glass. I pulled Andrew's envelope from my coat pocket, opened it, and read it once more. Then I set it by the window to let the moonlight wash over it. I whispered, as much to myself as to every woman who'd ever been forgotten. We don't need anyone to save us. We just need to stop asking permission to live as ourselves. And in that moment I felt a strange calm. No more hatred, no more bitterness. Just a lightness like dawn after a storm when the first light touches my hands, warm, true, and clear. I smiled. For the first time in years, Helen Ward felt free. A year passed. Spring skies in Connecticut were clear as freshly washed glass, and I remember that morning well, the morning I held the deed to my old house in my hands. I stood in the yard, looking at brick walls faded by time. Moss clung to the porch, and the wood windows still leaned into the sun like the day I left. It had been years since I sold this house to help Andrew build Ward Pharmaceuticals. And now, with the settlement from the lawsuit and what I had left in savings, I had bought back the place where everything began. No one can predict the turn of fate. Some things we lose never return, but some places wait for us patient as forgiveness. I walked slowly through the backyard where the lavender bushes had dried to husks, yet still released a faint scent when the wind passed. By the old fence, the apple tree Andrew and I planted when he was in grade school still stood. A few branches had broken, the trunk was rough, but the roots held deep, stubborn, and strong, proof of time's endurance. I was lost in thought when a familiar voice rang out, "Grandma! Grandma! I found a rabbit!" Sophie's voice was as bright as little bells. I turned to see her running across the grass, blonde curls flying in the wind. Andrew followed behind with a paint bucket and some tools. The scene made me smile. A year ago, I wouldn't have dared to imagine seeing my son and granddaughter in this old yard again, but today, among peeling walls and overgrown grass, my family felt close, not a memory, but the present. Andrew set the bucket on the porch. "Mom, I bought new paint. We'll start with the living room walls." I nodded. "Okay, let's save the kitchen for later. I want it to keep the smell of cinnamon and pumpkin." Sophie ran over and hugged me, hands covered in dirt. "Can I plant flowers here, Grandma? I want our garden to have lots of purple ones." I bent down and wiped her hands. "Of course, sweetheart. Here, you can plant anything you want. This is our home." Laughter floated up, light as sunlight through leaves. I watched my two loved ones repaint the walls, the brush sounds mixing with birdsong on the roof. Peace threaded into my breathing. By late afternoon, the light slanted gold across the porch. I set the old wooden table in the backyard, the same spot where we used to have Thanksgiving when Andrew was little. The smell of fresh pumpkin pie filled the air, bringing back so many holidays when I was the busy woman in Fide. A small kitchen who hadn't yet met loneliness. Andrew wiped his hands and sat across from me. A few white paint specks dotted his face. His hair was messy, but in his eyes there was a light I hadn't seen in a long time. Peace. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you for saving me." I placed a slice of pie on his plate and looked at my son for a long moment. "No, Andrew," I answered gently. "I didn't save anyone. I just helped you see yourself." He lowered his head, silent. A breeze scattered lavender petals across the table, sparkling in the evening Sunday. I watched Sophie race around the yard, holding a paintbrush like a magic wand, laughing out loud. "Grandma, I'm done. Our house is the most beautiful in the world." I laughed, my voice carried by the wind. "Yes, sweetheart, our house is beautiful." In that moment, I thought maybe happiness isn't something flashy or extravagant like people say. Maybe it's simply returning to where it once hurt the most and finding your heart no longer trembles. When night fell, we sat at the small kitchen table we'd just painted. The room glowed warm under the soft lamp, the pumpkin pie scent mingling with cinnamon and vanilla. I poured red wine into 3 glasses, 2 for us, and grape juice in the small one for Sophie. "Tonight no one's spilling wine," I joked with a wink. Andrew burst out laughing, the first real laugh I'd heard from him in years. It wasn't forced, and it wasn't weighed down by regret. Sophie giggled and raised her glass like a grown-up. "Cheers!" We clinked. The crystal ring sounded like the first note of a new chapter. I looked at my son. His face was bright in the lamplight, not with the shine of success, but with the calm of someone who's found peace. I said softly, "Andrew, I've always believed anyone can lose their way. What matters is whether they have the courage to come back." He nodded. "I wasted so much time, Mom." I smiled, gazing out at the crescent moon peeking through the apple branches. "It's okay, son. That apple tree lost branches too, but this year it still bloomed." Andrew took my hand. His grip was firm and warm, nothing like the day he bowed his head in tears in my apartment last year. Sophie climbed into my lap and whispered, "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you." I held her close and smiled. "If you live kindly and love well, you're already strong." That night, after Sophie fell asleep, I stepped onto the porch. The world was still. Stars scattered across the sky, reflected in the freshly cleaned window glass. I looked around the house, the paint still fragrant, the corners feeling as if they'd come back to life. I touched the wall, feeling the cool brick and my own warmth. The pain, humiliation, betrayal, all of it seemed to drift off in the night breeze. Maybe this was the ending I never dared to dream of, not a victory, but a homecoming. Through the window, I saw Andrew asleep in a chair, still holding his new planning notebook. And Sophie, smiling in her sleep, lips murmuring, "Grandma." I smiled softly. One chapter had closed, opening another where I was no longer the erased mother but Helen Ward, the woman who found her way back home. And for the first time in years, I lifted my glass and spoke into the quiet night. Cheers to the past, the present, and to what's still waiting to bloom. That fall arrived gently. The maples by the porch turned gold, and a soft breeze moved through the open windows. I was 67, my hair almost entirely silver, yet I'd never felt younger than I did then. After years of silence, I realized people can be reborn not by magic, but by truth and courage. I started teaching again, not medicine, but how to heal from within. A local community center invited me to run a small class called Caring for Courage, for middle-aged women who'd been hurt, betrayed, or who had lost faith in themselves. On the first day, I walked into a small classroom with an old whiteboard, wooden chairs, and sunlight streaming through the windows. 12 women sat waiting, each carrying a different pain. One had just divorced after 30 years. One had been pushed out by her children. Another had lost her job at 58. They looked at me with eyes mixed with doubt and hope. I didn't bring a lecture. I just said, "I don't have a formula for happiness. I only know that sometimes we have to hit bottom to see the surface." The room went quiet. Then one woman cried. Then the second. The third. We stayed together for 3 hours, telling stories they'd never dared to speak aloud. I only listened, no judgment, no advice. At the end, I handed each of them a small slip of paper. It had just 4 words: "You are still here." The course ran for 3 months. From the original 12, it grew to 30, then 50. Women came from all over the state. They didn't come to hear me talk. They came to see that even someone who had been slapped by her own son at a dinner table could still get up and smile. The next March, I received an invitation from Women Reclaiming Power, a national conference for women who inspire others across America. The letter read, "We would like Mrs. Helen Ward to join as a keynote speaker to share your story, your journey from silence to strength." I read that line over and over, filled with a strange feeling. Years ago, I was invited to my son's company launch, where I sat at the last table, silent like a stranger. Now, they were asking me to stand on a stage. On the day of the conference, the hall in Boston was packed. More than 800 people attended, businesswomen, activists, teachers, and ordinary women like me. On the big screen, my name appeared, Helen Ward. the woman who stood up. I took a deep breath. As I stepped onto the stage, the lights were bright enough to sting, yet warm. I saw hundreds of faces looking up not to pity me, but to listen. I began with a small smile. I used to think I was just an ordinary mother. I believed love meant sacrifice, silence, endurance. Until one day, at a Thanksgiving dinner, my own son's hand struck my face, and I woke up. The hall went still. I looked toward the third row where Andrew and Sophie Saturday. My son wore a simple suit, without the old pride. Beside him, Sophie sat straight, eyes shining, her small hands clasped tight. I went on, my voice steady and unbroken, low, slow, and clear. A slap can knock you down. It can also wake you up if you choose to stand. I don't hate my son. I only hate that I let others define my worth for too long. A wave of silence rolled through the hall. I saw people wipe tears, others held hands. And then, when I spoke the last line, applause rose first scattered, then swelling, and finally a warm tide filling the room. I stood there, feeling every clap, every gaze turned upward. No one pitied me. They respected me as a woman who had found herself again. I bowed, thanked the audience, then looked down. Andrew looked at me, his eyes wet, but his smile gentle. Sophie stood up, clapping hard, her face glowing. When the talk ended, many people came to hug me, take pictures, and ask for an autograph. I smiled not for fame, but because I knew Helen Ward was no longer the mother of CEO Andrew Ward. She was simply herself. That night, we returned to a small hotel near the Charles River. Outside, lights shimmered on the water, and the wind carried the briny chill of early spring. I sat by the window, sipping ginger tea, feeling as if I'd just closed a life cycle. Andrew sat across from me, quiet for a long time, then said, "Mom, I watched the video of your speech. You know, I've never seen you so strong." I let out a small laugh. "I'm not really strong, son. I'm just not afraid anymore." Sophie ran over and hugged me. "Grandma, everyone in." The hall stood up and clapped for you. "You're famous now." I smoothed her hair and smiled. "I don't need to be famous, sweetheart. I just need people to know they're worthy of standing up, that's enough." Boston's night was quiet. Outside, the city lights floated on the river like drifting crystal. I looked in the mirror and saw a silver-haired woman with steady eyes and a calm smile. Not the smile of a victor, but of someone reborn. I knew I'd completed a journey from silenced and dismissed to a voice that's heard, from the CEO's mother to Helen Ward, the woman who dares to say no. I turned off the light and whispered into the dark, "Thank you, life, for giving me the chance to stand up." And as the river breeze slipped through the window, I felt it clearly. I was breathing, living, and freer than ever. I left Boston not long after the conference. My life moved into a new chapter, quiet, simple, and full of meaning. Now I live in a small house by the coast in Maine, where the morning sun pours through the windows and glints off the polished wood floors like a mirror. Outside are the sounds of waves, gulls calling to each other, and the salt on the wind. I planted white daisies around the house, the flowers my husband loved. They bloom each season, delicate yet resilient, just like the women who've been knocked down by storms but still rise, proud. In the mornings, I sit by the window with a cup of ginger tea, open my old typewriter, and start to write. My memoir is almost finished. I've titled it The Red Wine Secret. The story begins on that Thanksgiving night, the red wine spilling down a $10,000 white dress, my son's hand striking my face amid music and glittering lights. The moment my life collapsed, only to be reborn from the wreckage. As I wrote the final page, I realized what matters isn't what others did to me, it's what I did after I was hurt. I don't feel bitter anymore. I feel grateful because without that fall, I might never have discovered where my real strength lies. One afternoon, I was watering flowers on the porch when the phone rang. The caller ID showed one name, Andrew. I answered, and his voice came warm, warmer than ever. "Mom, I just read your manuscript. I don't know what to say except, I'm proud of you." I smiled, looking out at the sea. The waves gleamed amber in the sunset. "Thank you, Andrew," I said slowly. "But maybe, now I'm truly proud of myself." On the other end, I heard him laugh the peaceful laugh I had wished for all those years. "Mom, I hope when the book comes out, people will understand why I always call you my quiet hero." I answered softly. "No, I'm just a mother who was once afraid, and finally learned to say no." We were quiet for a moment. I heard Sophie laughing in the background, calling Grandma through the phone. I smiled the smile of someone who'd traveled the full circle of pain to return to love. That evening, I sat in front of a small camera, ready to record a short video for those who followed my journey. Warm light reflected off the glass of red wine beside me. I looked into the lens and spoke naturally, light as the breeze. If you've been humiliated, treated unfairly, please don't stay silent forever. Sometimes, silence is the first step to reclaiming your dignity, but only if you choose to rise from it. I paused, lifted the glass, and held it up to the lens. The sunset glinted on the glass, casting a ribbon of red like blood, but also like fire. This red used to be shame, a wound, but today it's a symbol of freedom. I tapped the glass lightly, the light trembling like a greeting to my own past. After the video ended, I stepped onto the porch and listened to the waves. The sky deepened to violet. Far off, the lighthouse came on, turning slowly, shining across the glittering water. I closed my eyes, tasting the salt on my lips, and felt a rare calm settle in. I learned over a lifetime that freedom isn't about letting go of everything. It's when you're no longer afraid of losing anything. I'm no longer the mother of CEO Andrew Ward. I'm no longer the woman humiliated at a dinner party. I am Helen Ward, the woman who stood up and chose to live true to herself. I set the camera down and replayed the video. My voice filled the small room, mingling with the sound of the sea. I listened, not to edit, but to remind myself, never fear your own voice, because sometimes a single word can save your entire life. I looked up at the moonlight pouring through the window, spilling across the table, and the glass of red wine still catching the last of the sunset. I took a small sip, the tannins easing across my tongue the taste of freedom. And then I spoke softly to myself. Small but steady. Cheers. To all the women learning to stand up. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this story. I know somewhere out there, you've seen a mother, a grandmother, or even yourself hurt and afraid to speak. If this story made you feel less alone, tell me where you're watching from and share how it touched you in the comments. I've always believed that respect and justice never go out of style. If you believe that too, please like and subscribe so we can tell more stories of strong women, women who don't need rescuing, only to be heard. Because somewhere inside each of us, there's a Helen Ward waiting to wake up. Mom, don't contact us anymore. Our whole family needs space. The text from my son arrived on the night of my 67th birthday, right as I was setting a chocolate mousse cake, his childhood favorite, on the dining table. I had waited for him all day. Every time a car passed, I looked up. Every time my phone buzzed, I let myself hope. And then what I got was a cold sentence passed on a mother's love. The doorbell rang. My daughter-in-law stood there with a blade-thin smile and a folder in her hand. Guardianship papers. Sign them so I can take better care of you. I looked into her eyes, and in that instant I understood. What they wanted to keep wasn't me, it was the $50 million I control. Sign? No. I smiled, opened a drawer, and pressed the tiny recorder button under the wooden table. They didn't know that the very moment they thought they were cutting me out was when I began erasing them from my life. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Estelle Raymond, 67, widowed 8 years. I live alone in an old Upper East Side apartment, the home Grant, my late husband, and I shared for 3 decades. He died of a stroke while golfing in Arizona. In that moment, my world collapsed, but at least I still had my son Adrian, the one remaining hope. Grant was calm, practical, and good at investing. He didn't leave a gushy will. He built a family trust with asset protection terms. I'm the primary beneficiary with full authority over the income real estate shares, stocks, bonds, and an investment fund worth about $50 million. When he died, people said I was lucky. But losing your partner and being left with only money that isn't luck, it's a test. I once thought at least I still had my son and a family. To fill the emptiness, I started giving too much, too easily. In the first year after Grant died, Adrian got divorced. I paid his attorney fees and rented him an apartment in Westchester so he could stabilize. A year. Later, he remarried Tessa, a young, beautiful, sharp woman who used to work in PR, and I foolishly paid for the lavish Long Island wedding. I gifted them a honeymoon in Italy and covered the down payment on their new house in Westport, the place they called our dream home. I did it all not to show off, but because I thought that was love. I wanted my son never to struggle the way his parents once had. I didn't realize that when you give without asking for gratitude, people start treating kindness like an obligation. Every Thanksgiving, Christmas, or birthday, I prepped gifts, checks, transfers. All they had to say was, "Mom, we're a bit tight," and I opened my wallet. A walking ATM, like people joke online, maybe that was me. But this year was different. My kitchen tonight was still, lit only by candles flickering against Grant's framed photo. The chocolate mousse cake smelled rich, its surface still glossy. I had mixed the batter with arthritic hands, each stir a memory of when Adrian was small, a curly-haired boy grinning wide, begging for the biggest slice with the most frosting. I'd texted him in the morning, "Birthday cake is ready. Come by any time." No reply. By afternoon, I told myself he was busy. That night, when the clock struck 8 p.m., I turned on the porch light and set out plates for 3, me, Adrian, and Tessa. Each time a car went by, I stood up, heart racing, only to be disappointed. When the text, "Mom, don't contact us anymore, our whole family needs space," appeared, I thought I'd misread it. I sat frozen, watched the candle tremble and go out. Only me remained, and the truth. I had lost my son. Not for lack of love, but for loving too much. 3 days later, the cake still sat there. No one came. No birthday wish. Not a single flower. On the 4th day, I lifted the lid. The cream had turned sour. I wiped my eyes and scraped it into the trash, the spoon clanging against the sink like metal, striking my heart. I didn't know if I was crying for the cake, for my son, or for myself. But I knew this. Every illusion had to be thrown out like that cake. I sat at the table, pulled out my expense notebook, and turned to the old pages. $80,000 for the first divorce fees, $40,000 for the honeymoon, $200,000 for the Westport down payment, $12,000 a year for Maya and Owen's tuition, plus hundreds of thousands more for holidays, gifts, birthdays. I wrote the total, more than $1 million. Next to it, I added a small line, "Number of times you asked, 'Mom, are you okay?' 0. That wasn't just financial math. It was an indictment. Adrian, the boy who once held my hand through Central Park, who promised, 'I'll take care of you when I grow up,' now called only when he needed money. Tessa, the daughter-in-law who hugged me after the wedding and said, 'I'm so happy to,' Have a mom like you," now met me with a cold gaze, a smile on her lips but not in her eyes. At family dinners, I sat at the head of the table while they talked renovations, school choices, vacations, all paid with my money, yet no one asked my opinion. I'd become a decoration in their lives. My grandkids Maya, 13, and Owen, 11, were polite and well-mannered but distant, as if I were a guest. I suspect Tessa taught them that polite is enough. They'd say grandma and then go back to their phones. I don't blame them. Children reflect what adults teach. I used to think that as long as they were happy, it was fine if I took the loss. But that text was a wake-up call. "Mom, don't contact us anymore." I read it once, twice, 3 times. Each reading sent the pain in reverse from my heart to my throat, lodging there. In that moment, I understood. They didn't need me. They needed my money. And if they could sever things with a text, I had the right to sever back, not with words, but with action. I stood, went to the kitchen cabinet. In a small metal box under the drawer, I opened the lid. Inside was a mini recorder. Grant once gave me, "In case you ever need proof during negotiations." I placed it beneath the dining table. I knew sooner or later Adrian and Tessa would come back, not because they missed me, but because of money matters. And when they did, I would let the truth speak for itself. That night I brewed orange blossom tea and sat by the window looking down at the street. Below, headlights stretched on, horns blared, people rushed while I sat in an apartment once full of laughter, now hearing only the tick of a clock. Strangely, for the first time in years, I felt clear-headed. Not a wounded mother, but a woman waking from a long sleep called sacrifice. I looked at Grant's photo and whispered, "You once told me that if someone treats my kindness as a given, I must teach them the value of loss." I smiled. Maybe today is that day. I turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow of a half-melted birthday candle. Then I opened my notebook and wrote on a fresh page, "The Estelle plan starting today." If someone asked me, "What made you endure all those years?" I wouldn't answer right away. Because honestly, I didn't feel like I was enduring, at least not then. I thought I was giving, and in a widowed mother's heart, giving felt like the only way to feel needed. 10 years ago, after Grant passed, my world became too quiet. The Park Avenue apartment, white walls, polished wood floors once filled with the jazz he played every afternoon, now had only the hiss of the heater. At first, I couldn't stand the silence. I left the TV on all night, kept the hallway lights on, trying to fool myself someone was home. Then Adrian started stopping by more often. My only son tall, with his father's face, a warm voice. Each time he came, the apartment seemed to breathe again. He'd say, "Mom, I don't want you to be lonely. I just need to know you're okay." I believed it. While he talked, I'd pour tea, set out cookies, and feel myself calm. But gradually, those visits began with different openings. "Mom, I've got a little issue at the office." "Mom, my attorney says I need a retainer." "Mom, I'm house hunting, but Westport is expensive." Those moms made me feel useful. And in the emptiness of grief, being needed is a sedative. I wrote checks, made transfers, sent cash, paid bills not because I was forced, but because I believed love was continuing, just changing shape. I didn't realize the more I gave, the more I erased myself. The Park Avenue apartment where Grant and I lived more than 30 years sits along a boulevard washed in lights. Every corner holds a memory. There I cooked dinner, listened to Grant talk markets, risk and conviction. He always told me, "Money only matters when it's put in the right place, Estelle. Don't let it buy silence." I heard him then, but I didn't understand. Only when I compared it with the Westport house, where I paid nearly all the down payment, did I grasp what it means to buy silence. That house is beautiful, modern, with a wide yard and glass doors opening to a lawn smooth as silk. I remember the first day Adrian and Tessa took me to see it, both of them beaming like kids in a candy shop. "Mom, this is where our kids will grow up. This is our family's home." I smiled and signed a check for $200,000, never reading the small line below. The sponsor has no ownership rights. After that, every Sunday I drove nearly an hour from Manhattan to Westport for family dinner. I always brought Tessa's favorite dish, a bottle of wine from Grant's collection, and the hope that there'd be warmth there. But family dinner soon turned into a presentation. Adrian talked work. Tessa discussed redoing the kitchen, switching to Italian floors, repainting the living room. They called it upgrading the space. I knew better than anyone, upgrading with my money. They didn't ask what I wanted to eat. They just asked me to transfer funds before the contractors come this weekend. Each time, I smiled, nodded, and drove home in silence. I told myself, it's fine, as long as my son is happy. But the truth is, I no longer knew what happiness even meant. My attorney, Harold Benton, was the person Grant trusted most. He helped manage the trust, taxes, and investments. After Grant died, Harold checked in often with updates. "Mrs. Estelle," he once said, "I advise you to keep control. Don't let any expense become automatic." But I had Harold set up monthly transfers for Adrian, living costs, the kids' tuition, and even Tessa's credit cards. I said, "I just want them not to worry." Harold sighed but did it. Every month, numbers left my accounts automatically, and every month, the bond between me and my son left automatically too. In those 8 years, I helped Adrian save face more times than I can count. When he owed taxes, I wrote a check. When his car got towed for unpaid fees, I paid it. When he forgot Tessa's birthday, I booked the party. When they fought, I watched the kids so they could get a break. And through all those times, no one remembered my birthday. Year after year, late texts, or sometimes just an emoji. I told myself young people are busy, that I was asking too much. But there is a limit when you have to light your own birthday candle alone. Every excuse rings hollow. My friend Marjorie Hale, who lives 2 blocks away, once said over tea, "Estelle, giving without teaching is harm. You're not helping your son. You're making him believe you're a zero-interest bank." I laughed, sipped tea, and joked, "He's still my son, Marjorie. I can't just let him stumble." She looked at me, kind but firm, "But if you always catch him, he'll never learn to stand." Back then, I thought she was too strict. Now I know she was right word for word. The warning signs started last year. Adrian visited less, though I'm only an hour away. Whenever I called, he answered shortly, "I'm in a meeting." Tessa stayed polite, but her gaze had changed. One evening, when I offered to help fix their pool, she smiled and said, "You don't need to worry, Mom. You should focus on your health. Maybe you should let financial professionals manage your assets so you can relax." Her voice was sweet enough that, if you didn't listen closely, it sounded caring. But I heard something else, a shady intent under the sugar. That night, I opened my laptop and checked my bank accounts. Transfers steady, month after month. Money flowing out like water, and I had no idea how long I'd let the river run. I opened my notebook and began listing every gift from the last 8 years. Columns of numbers stretched on, nearly $2 million if I counted gifts, travel, and side investments. When I wrote the last line, my hand shook not from regret over money, but from seeing myself there, a woman who had erased herself with unconditional generosity. I sat very still. Only the clock ticked. I looked around the apartment, once full of laughter, now only Grant's smile in an oak frame. If he were alive, he wouldn't scold me, but he would ask, "Estelle, have you forgotten that kindness needs boundaries?" I touched the frame and answered in my heart, "Maybe I did forget, but I'll remember again, starting today." I closed the notebook, wiped my tears, then picked up my phone and opened contacts. Harold Benton's name lit up. I called, "Harold, I need to see you. As soon as possible." His voice was calm as ever. "What's going on, Mrs. Estelle?" I took a breath and spoke slowly, word by word. "I want to review everything. Every transfer, every authorization, every clause in the trust. I think it's time to turn the page." I hung up, stood, and made another cup of tea. For the first time in years, I didn't feel weak sitting alone. I felt clear, and I knew, if my wallet used to be a symbol of love, from today it would be a symbol of boundaries. The next morning I went to Harold's Midtown office. That building marble lobby, a hint of Arabica in the air, was where Grant and I sat with him for years discussing investments. But today wasn't about stocks or returns. Today I came to take back control. Harold looked at me over half-rimmed glasses, speaking gently. "Are you sure, Estelle? Pausing the automatic transfers will trigger a lot of reactions." I smiled and set my teacup down. Reactions are exactly what I need. No one knows the value of water until it's shut off. I signed the document stopping all automatic payments. The Westport mortgage, tuition, Tessa's credit cards, even Adrian's living stipend. As of today, that stream would stop. Harold nodded slowly. "I've never seen you this resolute. Maybe because I finally understand love isn't measured by a bank balance." I left the office and stepped onto the street. Early March air, cold and dry, filled my lungs, and I felt strangely light. I didn't say a word to Adrian. No text, no email, no call. They never asked if I was okay. I didn't need to warn them. I was about to change. At first, everything was quiet. On the third day, my voicemail filled up. "Mom, I think there's a bank glitch." The mortgage bounced. "Mom, Tessa says her card was declined at the store." "Can you check?" "Mom, maybe I messed up the transfer. Could you call Harold?" I listened to all of it and said nothing. Outside, the sky stayed gray, but in my kitchen, the morning light warmed a white porcelain cup. For the first time in years, I didn't feel dragged by guilt. By the sixth day, Adrian's voice lost its calm. "Mom," I called Harold. He said it was on your instruction. "Mom, what's happening? Please, at least tell me why." His voice held confusion, anger, and something I hadn't heard in a long time, fear. I turned on the answering machine and let it record everything. I wanted to hear the shift in tone from certainty to unease to desperation. On the seventh day, exactly 7:30 a.m. spanned pounding hit my door. I checked the clock, straightened my cream cardigan, and put on the pearl necklace Grant gave me on our 25th anniversary. I didn't rush. I walked slowly to the door. Adrian stood there, gaunt face, crooked tie, eyes mixed with anger and worry. Tessa beside him, hair in a tight bun, beige fur coat, gripping a designer bag like she was holding her dignity together. I opened the door, my voice light as if they were visiting on a regular morning. "Good morning, you two. Come in." Adrian strode inside. Tessa followed, lips pressed thin. "Mom, what is going on?" "What do you mean, dear?" I said, calmly pouring coffee. "All the payments have stopped. The mortgage, credit cards, Maya's tuition, everything. The bank says the stop order came from you." "That's right," I said, setting the cup down evenly. "I need to review a few things." Tessa let out a cold laugh. "You can't just do that. That's our money." I turned and met her eyes. "Sorry, sweetheart, but no. It's money I earned, I manage, and I pay taxes on. You've been beneficiaries, not heirs." The room went heavy. I pulled out a chair, sat at the table, and opened my brown leather notebook full of neat entries. "Adrian," I said, "do you know how much I've transferred to your household over 8 years?" "Mom, I didn't count." "I did," I answered, flipping pages, my voice steady. "A total of $1,842,000. That includes tuition, housing, insurance, travel, holidays." Birthdays. And that's just the documented amounts. I looked up at the two of them, frozen. Now I want you to see another sheet. I slid a printed page from an envelope. Number of visits to see me in 8 years, 32. Number of calls asking, "Mom, are you okay?" 7. Number of calls asking for money, transfers, or complaining about expenses, 43. I set the paper down. The rustle sounded loud in the silent kitchen. "See?" I said quietly. "This scale has been tilted far too long." Adrian dropped into a chair, fingers in his hair. "Mom, I know. I've been careless. But you can't just cut us off like this. The house, the car, the kids' tuition, everything depends on that money." I looked at him, caught between pity and exhaustion. That's exactly why I had to stop. "If everything depends on me, you're not the man of your family," Tessa cut in sharp. "What about this month's mortgage, food, school, the car? How do you expect us to manage?" I stood, walked unhurriedly to the coffee machine. "The way millions of families do, Tessa. Live within your means. Adrian has a job. And you," I paused, turned, and smiled lightly, "you can get one." Tessa glared. She started to speak, then swallowed it. That answer seemed to choke her. I set 2 hot coffees on the table and sat across from them. "I'm not cutting you off, I'm pausing. And I have a proposal." Both looked up. I opened my notebook and pulled out a folded page. "For the next 30 days, I want you to prove I'm still family, not a walking wallet. Not with apologies or gifts, but with simple actions. Call because you want to know how I'm doing, invite me to dinner for no reason at all, or send a real card with no transfer request attached." Tessa let out a bitter laugh. "Are you turning love into a test, Mom?" I answered without blinking. "No. I just want to know if there's any love left to save." Adrian looked at his wife, then back at me. "Mom, I promise. We'll do better. I know I've forgotten what matters." I nodded. "I hope so, but remember, if I sense this is just acting, just a performance to get the money back, then everything ends for good. No more chances." Silence stretched on. Only the wall clock ticked off each beat. Then Tessa spoke, her voice low, no longer hard. "In the meantime, who pays the bills, Estelle?" I looked at her, my eyes softer but my tone firm. Someone who's spent for 8 years without earning a dollar can certainly learn to spend less for 30 days. "And Adrian," I turned to my son, "you have a job, a salary. It's time to live on your own steam." I stood, ending the conversation. 30 days. After that, I'll decide whether it's worth turning the money back on. They stood too, saying nothing. When the door closed behind them, I stayed seated, listening to their footsteps fade down the hall. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a strange quiet settle over the apartment, quiet like after you shut off a water valve and still hear the last little drips in the pipes. That was the sound of dependency dying and of a mother beginning to learn how to love herself. I didn't have to wait long for the play to begin. Only 3 days after that shut-off morning, the phone rang. Adrian's name lit up on the screen, along with a photo of him grinning beside his wife and kids, the picture I kept as my wallpaper for years but deleted long ago. I let it ring to the 3rd chime before picking up. His voice was gentle, almost too gentle, like he was reading a rehearsed line. "Mom, I just wanted to check on you. You've been quiet lately. Are you eating enough?" I had to pause a few seconds not to laugh. My Adrian, the one who hadn't asked, "Mom, how are you?" in 3 years, suddenly cared about my nutrition. I answered evenly, "I'm fine. Thanks for asking." He paused, then continued, his tone almost too smooth. "I realize I've been awful. You've carried so much for us. I just want you to know I'm grateful. Someone who didn't know better might be moved." But I could hear paper rustling on his end, and Tessa's faint whisper behind him, prompting something. I spoke slowly, to let them believe I was softening. I know, Adrian. Thank you. Take care of yourself. I hung up and checked the time. 37 minutes later, the phone rang again, this time a blocked number. A young voice came through, trembling slightly like recitation. "Hi, Grandma. It's Maya. I just wanted to tell you about my day at school." I leaned back and listened as my granddaughter talked nonstop about math class, a new teacher, a science project. Every detail was too perfect, too polished, like a carefully assigned script. I let her finish, then asked gently, "Maya, who told you to call Grandma?" A brief silence, then her voice dropped. "Dad said you were sad. Mom said to call so you'd know the family still loves you." I sighed softly. "I understand." "Maya, listen. I'll always be your grandma. Do you hear me? Whether the adults are upset or not, that never changes." "Yes. Do you want to keep talking or do you have homework to do?" I have homework." "Then go study, sweetheart. I love you." "I love you too." I hung up, my heart sinking. I wasn't angry at Maya, only tender toward her. A child being pulled into a grown-up performance with her own clear little voice. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. The delivery guy stood outside, arms full of white lilies and pale pink roses so big he had to angle them through the doorway. A card tied with silver ribbon read, "Thinking of Mom with all my love. Tessa." I set the bouquet on the table, its sweetness almost choking. I remembered that even on my birthday, this woman had never sent flowers, never even called. Now that the money was shut off, she suddenly remembered motherly love. I snapped a photo of the bouquet, sent it to Harold with a note. "First signal. They've started performing." 2 days later, Tessa called. Her voice was bright, tinged with a shy friendliness, like she was trying to bond. "Mom, I know it's a busy week, but I'd love to take you out for a girls' day. Spa, nails, a little shopping, what do you think?" I smiled lightly. The same person who once mocked my dress as outdated in front of her friends now wanted a girls' day? "Sounds lovely, Tessa, but I'm a bit tied up this week." "I'll check my calendar." "Okay, take your time. I just want us to be closer. I've been thinking a lot." Her voice trailed off, then the line clicked. I watched the afternoon light filter through the vase on the table, lily petals making soft halos. Beautiful, yes, but beauty with a price tag. And I knew with Tessa, everything had a price, even affection. On the 8th day, the post office delivered a pale blue envelope. The scrawled line read, "To Grandma Estelle from Owen." Inside was a handwritten note. The penmanship was even careful, spotless, oddly so, unlike the hurried scrawl I'd seen from him on Christmas cards. "Grandma, I think you're wonderful. I'm sorry I don't say it more. I hope to see you soon. You're the best grandma in the world. I love you. Owen." I read it again and again, studying the strokes. Every letter was overly sculpted, the lines too straight, as if someone had guided his hand until it was perfect. It made me smile and ache at the same time. That evening I called Adrian. He picked up fast, hope in his voice. "Mom, I knew you'd call. I'm guessing the flowers moved you, right?" "The flowers are lovely, and Owen's letter is sweet," I said slowly. "But both smell of staging." "Mom, what are you saying?" "Adrian, listen to me clearly. If you truly want to repair this, start with honesty. Don't use the kids as tools to ask for money. Don't hand them scripts to read. I've lived long enough to hear the difference between truth and performance, silence on the other end. I could picture him glancing at Tessa, signaling her to be quiet, afraid I might hear something. "There's just one thing I want you to remember," I added, softer. "If these 30 days are real, I'll know. If they're just a show, I'll know that too. And then this door will close for good." I hung up before he could answer. Late at night, I brewed orange blossom tea and sat in the dining room, the warm lamp casting gold over the wood table. I reached under the table to the tiny recorder I'd stuck there last week. A small green light blinked, still powered, still working. I slipped on headphones and replayed the morning they came over. Tessa's sharp voice, "That's our money." Adrian's sigh, "Mom, at least tell me. What's going on?" Then, me steady, calm. Hearing myself, I felt no regret. I opened a new audio file, the calls from today. Every tone, every breath, every awkward pause from my son, my daughter-in-law, my grandkids captured. Part of me felt sad. I once dreamed our family would keep warm memories, not cold audio files. But another part knew, this is the truth. And truth, even when cold, deserves to be kept more than sweet lies do. Have you ever had to smile through a play you never signed up to watch? If you have, leave a line, just one line. I want to know how closely you recognize that feeling. I set the headphones down, turned off the lights, leaving only the small glow over the stove. Outside, New York slipped into spring rain, cars slicing through puddles. I closed my eyes and listened to the rain mingle with the even hum of the recorder. I thought of Grant, and what he once said, "Never confuse love with bribery. Once people know you fear loneliness, they'll turn it into a weapon." I smiled. Grant was right. But maybe this time, the weapon is in my hands. The next day, I woke early. Thin sunlight slid through the curtains. I set the kettle on, opened my laptop, and backed up every recording to a separate drive. Folder name, Opening Act. I knew this was just the first scene. And the writer this time wasn't Adrian or Tessa. It was me. Marjorie's text arrived at midday as I finished brewing tea and rearranging the lilies that had begun to droop. My old friend never minced words. "Estelle, I was at the country club yesterday." Tessa sat with the tennis ladies. She spoke softly but just loud enough for the whole table. "My mother-in-law's been odd lately, impulsive spending, not stable since her husband died. We might have to bring in an expert to assess capacity." I froze, the flower stem slipping in my hand. A petal snapped against the crystal with a click. Marjorie lowered her voice. "I'm not telling you to hurt you, but you need to know they're laying the road for a different script." "Thank you," I said. Two small words felt like stones in a dry throat. I hung up and stood still for a long moment, listening to the clock beat against the wall. In my head, the pieces clicked into place. Flowers, the handwritten note, the check-in calls. Then the club whispers one side, painting the picture of devoted children trying to care, the other casting me as the erratic widow, difficult, with strange spending. If people heard only half the story, they'd side with the dutiful child. I dialed Harold Benton. He picked up almost instantly. "Harold, answer me honestly. Has anyone at all called your office asking about my financial capacity or mental competency?" A beat of silence. I heard him set his glasses down. "Estelle, I shouldn't disclose informal inquiries. But since you asked," Adrian called. "He said you'd made a few unusual financial decisions. Asked about capacity evaluations and guardianship mechanisms and what the first steps would be." The floor seemed to tilt under me. Strangely, instead of breaking, everything inside me went still. "What did you tell him, Harold?" "I said you are fully lucid and that any move to limit your capacity would waste time and money and could backfire in court. I also told him if he truly cares, he should start by checking on his mother." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady again. "We have more work to do." I hung up and looked down at the busy avenue. The first sharp pain sealed like a cut under a clean bandage. It was clear now. The pricey bouquet, the painstaking note, the gentle calls were props. They were building a backdrop. We care so much. While up close, they shoved me into the role of unstable mother. I poured more tea. The steam fogged the glass. In that haze, I saw my reflection no longer trembling. If they wanted to play on the legal field, That's exactly where I'd meet them. That afternoon, I called Dr. Lila Khan's office, the neurocognitive specialist Harold once mentioned. The assistant asked a few screening questions. The earliest slot was next Wednesday, a half-day comprehensive assessment. Memory, attention, executive function, plus a clinical interview. We'll send an official appointment letter and the documents to bring. Thank you, I added, clearly on purpose. The results must be stamped and suitable for court filings. I hung up, marked the date in red, and wrote beneath it, "Calm is the first piece of proof." That evening, I called Maya. It rang a long time. I guessed she was deep in homework. Finally, a young voice. "Grandma? Finished studying, Maya?" Almost. I paused a second, then chose the gentlest way to say it. "I want you to know this. The grown-ups have grown-up problems. You don't need to call Grandma as a duty. Call if you want to or don't. I'll always be Grandma, and you'll always be my grandchild. No one gets to use that bond to scare you." Silence, then a little sigh of relief. "I understand, Grandma. Go study. If you want this weekend, I'll take you to the New York Public Library. The picture reading room is beautiful." "Yes." Her voice suddenly brightened. I texted Owen a short line. "Don't worry about Grandma. Study well, play ball safely. I can take care of myself." He sent back a basketball and a heart simple, more honest than any letter. That night I opened my brown leather journal and started a meticulous log. Time, place, what was said, who said what, in what tone, which bouquet arrived, what the card said. I even copied Marjorie's text verbatim. I taped the flower delivery receipt to the page with clear tape. Each page a puzzle piece, building a rebuttal file I could carry into any hearing. I printed an 8-year summary, total transfers, real check-ins, number of money requests, all numbered, dated, matched with statements. I added notes on the birthdays they forgot not to play the victim, but to contextualize behavior. I stacked everything into a red envelope, the color I use for documents no one gets to pretend they didn't see. The next morning I called Adrian. "Next Friday night I want dinner with the whole family. No occasion, just family dinner." He hesitated. "Mom, we'd love that. At the Westport house?" "Good. And I have a few things to say after dessert. Please invite 2 of my friends. They're older, kind. Seat them at the end of the table." "Which friends?" "The ones you met at your father's funeral. Jacob Stein, retired from Wexler, and Dr. Naomi Chu, a family therapist. They're coming for dinner, just dinner." I heard him swallow. "Okay, I'll arrange it." I hung up. The independent third parties weren't to threaten anyone. Their presence alone would be enough as silent witnesses for a night that needed clarity. While waiting for Dr. Khan's appointment, my phone kept buzzing. Apologies soft as velvet, tidy check-ins, offers to take you to the park, to lunch. I picked the gentlest invitations to keep the 30-day rhythm enough to lengthen the rope, enough to thicken the mask. Each night I checked the chip under the table, exported files, and labeled them by date and content. Tessa Flowers card, Adrian apology dinner. I didn't replay them to torture myself. I saved them to spare future arguments. As Americans say, if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. For me, if it isn't recorded, it will be retold differently. On the day, I arrived at Dr. Lila Khan's clinic. Bright waiting room, the faint smell of freshly sharpened pencils. She appeared with a neat silver cut and clear, kind eyes. The evaluation ran for hours. Digit spans, block designs, rule switching, reading comprehension interpretation. Midway, she offered tea. "Are you stressed, Estelle?" "I feel oddly calm," I said honestly. "Maybe because for the first time, I don't need to prove I'm a good mother. I just need to prove I'm lucid." She smiled and finished the last task. I left with a pickup date for results. the center's blue stamp shining. On the sidewalk, the sky felt like an open door. No rumor could declare me unstable anymore. In the afternoon, I stopped by the small church on Madison, sat in the back, and didn't ask for anything grand. I just told Grant in my heart, I'm doing the right thing. When I stepped out, sunlight shattered across the red brick, quiet, proud. That evening, I called Marjorie and described the dinner plan. She chuckled. I'll wear the wine-colored coat. Need me to say anything? I just need you to sit, breathe, and watch. Sometimes that's enough. In the days that followed, I finalized a timeline. Who called when, whether I answered, the main point of each exchange. I printed 3 copies, one for me, one for Harold, one sealed in the safe. The night before dinner, I stood in my kitchen and looked around. The home was quiet but not sad. White porcelain cups, fresh flowers, the table runner Grant loved. I placed 2 things in my handbag. Doctor. Khan's evaluation signed and stamped, and my 8-year summary. Not to flaunt, just so that if anyone chose to forget, the papers would remember for me. I rested my hand on the bag and felt my heartbeat steady. Strangely, I wasn't nervous. Tomorrow night wasn't a trial or a stage. It was just family dinner. But I knew that at that dinner, the truth would sit in the center of the table like a main course no one could ignore. I turned off the stove and drew the curtains. Outside, New York roared. Inside, I touched the pearls at my neck and heard Grant's voice like a breeze. Don't let money buy silence, Estelle. I smiled. Not this time. Because tomorrow, I would 5. Speak with documents, with numbers, with the calmest voice I have. And when all the rumors fall away, only one thing will stand. I know who I am. 3 days after I received Dr. Lila Khan's evaluation, Harold called back, I know someone you can trust. No flash, tight as a locked lake. Name's Quinn Park Private Investigator. He helped Grant in that Manhattan asset dispute back in 2011. I remembered that case. Grant once said, Quinn has the brain of an accountant and the instincts of a cop. I nodded, though Harold couldn't see me. Give him my number. 2 days later, right at 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. A man in his mid-40s, tall, lean, charcoal coat spoke in a low, even voice. He showed his license, then said, Mrs. Estelle, I know this needs to be quiet. No one besides you and Mr. Benton should know I exist. I nodded and poured black coffee. What do you need from me, Mr. Park? Only 3 things. Old statements, transaction, emails with the bank, and temporary access to the trust account. I'll find the rest. I set a thick envelope on the table, everything ready. I want to know where the money I sent Adrian went. Every dollar. And if there are outsiders involved, I want names. Quinn's mouth twitched. A cool light flashed behind his glasses. I'll dig. But prepare yourself when money's involved. People rarely stop at ungrateful. 7 days later, he came back. The Park Avenue kitchen was bright with early spring light, but when Quinn opened his laptop, the gray-blue screen glinted colder than any metal. Here's their financial picture, Mrs. Estelle. First line, 7 credit cards, total balance, $148,000. Next, a second mortgage on the Westport house, $320,000. And a string of late payments from the kids' private school. I stayed quiet, staring at the numbers like a house whose walls were slowly cracking. Worse, Quinn said. They set up an intermediary account, call it a buffer account. It's registered to Tessa, but the primary recipient is Adrian. He zoomed in on a cash flow chart. Each month, the transfers I made to the family trust were split 80% to the main account, 20% to the buffer account. From there, the money cycled, paying down a slice of debt, then moving back, creating the illusion of a clean, transparent flow. A soft way to launder movement, Quinn said. Perfectly legal on paper and convincing enough to make outsiders think every expense is on the level. I leaned back. a chill running along my spine. How long have they been doing this? At least 2.5 years. I also found their private sessions with a separate financial advisor named Meryl Stone, Family Asset Management. Meetings are scheduled on Tuesdays, often right after your monthly transfers. Quinn took a sip of coffee, then spoke slowly, like reciting a confession for someone else. Then comes the worst part. He opened another folder labeled Social Witnesses. They're building a social file on you. Neighbors saying, you forget things. Club staff claiming you talk to yourself in the locker room. A yoga coach saying you lose focus during meditation. All logged with email confirmations between Tessa and an attorney named Robert Kane. My breathing grew heavy, not from shock, but from realizing every tiny quirk and petty rumor had been weaponized on purpose. They need social proof to bolster a guardianship case, Quinn explained. On paper, they're dutiful children caring for a mother who's slipping out of control. I asked, my voice rough. Since when did they start thinking about this? Quinn rotated the screen, extracted emails with a timeline. Right after Mr. Grant's funeral, I have a memo from Kane to Adrian. The emotional period following loss is an appropriate time to initiate a soft guardianship plan. Those 4 words, soft guardianship plan, made me want to laugh. Polished language for legalized theft. Quinn went on. I also found a parallel legal advice schedule with Meryl. They discussed getting familiar with the local judge and building goodwill with the Westport community. For 5 years, they've been stockpiling good witnesses by donating to the school fund, attending galas, and telling the story of a mother-in-law unbalanced by loneliness. I was silent for a long time. Outside, a siren wailed and thinned into the air. And you're certain this data is accurate? I have copies of emails, appointments, transfer statements, even Kane's internal notes I recovered from an archive account. Everything is encrypted and backed up to a separate drive. I nodded slightly. Good. Print 2 sets. One for you, one for me. Quinn looked at me a bit surprised. You don't want me to keep monitoring? No need. I don't need more proof to understand people. I just need enough to lay on the table when they say, for Mom's sake. That afternoon, I sat in my study printing everything. The steady whir of the printer sounded like someone's heartbeat counting down. I organized it all. Cash flow charts. List of buffer accounts. Emails about guardianship. Attorney Kane's transaction logs, notes from Meryl Stone. I clipped each set, labeled them in red, and slid them into a red envelope the color Grant always said was only for truths no one can deny. I sealed it and placed it in the safe beside Dr. Lila Khan's report. Dr. Khan did not disappoint. In the cover letter, she'd added a handwritten line, no signs of cognitive decline. Mrs. Estelle is fully lucid. Reasoning, memory, and emotional regulation are strong. Any contrary claims lack medical basis. I read that line again, and again, not to reassure myself, but because it sounded like music that finally loosened a knot. Those 10 lines weighed more than all the money Adrian and Tessa ever demanded. I leaned back. Late sun striped through the blinds onto the pearls at my throat, flashing like Grant's reminder, don't let anyone retell your story the way they want. Quinn called again that evening. Voice even, Mrs. Estelle, I'm sending the backup on an encrypted drive. Password is your and Mr. Grant's wedding date. I'll keep a second backup in secure storage. Only you or Mr. Benton can access it. Thank you, Quinn. What do you plan to do next? I looked out the window at New York, glittering like a sea of indifferent lights. Nothing yet, I said slowly. Only when they believe I've bitten the bait does the final move really land. He paused, then spoke softly. Mrs. Estelle, you're not just lucid, you're formidable. I smiled. Don't worry, I'm not. Chasing victory. I'm reclaiming fairness, the thing they forgot how to define. That night, I reopened the opening act folder and added a new one, Hidden Flow's Financial Evidence. 2 folders, 2 stories. One about feelings, one about figures. Together they formed the full portrait of betrayal by people I used to call family. I closed the laptop and switched off the light. Street glow poured through the window, falling on the red envelope on my desk, its shadow on the wall like a seal over a secret now complete. I touched it lightly, a thin smile rising. Now I have enough ammunition. No shouting, no noisy revenge, just one evening and one line at the right moment, and everything will cave in. Day 29. A damp, pale New York morning. I was making tea when the phone rang. Adrian's name. I hesitated a few seconds, then answered. "Mom," his voice caught. "I'm sorry. I've thought a lot these past weeks. You're right, we were wrong." I said nothing. I could hear shaky breathing. Then Tessa's voice, strangely soft. "Mom, I know I've been disrespectful. I was afraid you'd be sad, so I acted foolishly. I want to start over, truly, Mom. If I hadn't had recordings and an investigation file, I might have cried. But now every word of that apology sounded like lines read smooth at a final rehearsal. I only said, "Thank you both. This Friday I want to meet the whole family. Dinner, Westport." A brief pause, then Adrian rushed in. "Of course, Mom. We'll make it happen." I set the phone down and sipped my tea. The orange blossom was still sweet, but it couldn't mask the cold steel spreading in my chest. The board was set. All that remained was the last move. That afternoon I video called Maya and Owen. They were in the study room, shelves behind them stacked with picture books and little science models. I smiled, voice easy, like nothing big was coming. "I'm coming for dinner this weekend. But I want to tell you both something. No matter what happens, remember Grandma loves you unconditionally. The grown-up stuff I'll handle. You just keep studying and being kind. Deal?" Owen nodded. Maya asked softly, "Will you be okay, Grandma?" "I used to be fragile," I said, "but not anymore. Just remember, kindness isn't the same as silence." I ended the call feeling lighter. Kids shouldn't watch a battlefield, but I want them to know the truth is never something to be ashamed of. That evening, I called Harold Benton. "Friday, 7 p.m. I need you on standby. If I signal, FaceTime in and confirm live legal witnessing." "Understood, Estelle. I'll have the Westport deed and the trust documents ready. Everything is in your name. Good. Test the connection beforehand." I hung up and looked at the red envelope on the table. Inside, along with Quinn Park's report, were copies of Dr. Lila Khan's evaluation and the timeline I built. Transfer dates. Dates they called. Dates the unstable mother rumor spread, and the first day they mentioned guardianship. All arranged like a score of betrayal, one I, and no one else, would play for them. The last 2 days I was busier than I'd been in years. Not planning payback, but putting my life back in order. I went to Harold's office and signed the new will. "Are you sure, Estelle?" he asked, voice low. "Very sure," I said, crisp. The entire estate house, stocks, investment funds, savings, totaling roughly $50 million, will go to the Grant Estelle Foundation for scholarships and community health. My husband's name will live there with mine, not in the hearts of people who see him as a checkbook. Harold nodded, eyes a little wet. "He'd be proud of you." I smiled. "I'm not doing it to make him proud. I'm doing it so I can be at peace." Day 30, Friday morning. I rose early, took the red envelope out of the safe, and slipped it into my small handbag. Before leaving, I opened the kitchen drawer and checked the mini recorder hidden under the liner. The light blinked green. Full battery. I called my locksmith on Madison. "Can we schedule tomorrow morning? Replace all locks at the Westport house. Front, back, garage." "I'll be there for paperwork." "Yes, 8 a.m., ma'am." I hung up, feeling strangely light. No matter how dinner went, tomorrow I'd have the keys. At lunch, I stopped by a small spot on Lexington for the onion soup Grant loved. In the back booth, I flipped through the copies again. Westport title held by the Grant Estelle Family Trust. Trustee, Estelle K. Grant. Temporary eviction packet already signed, one confirmation away. Attorney Kane's email to Tessa using the line, "Once the mother-in-law is deemed incapacitated, the trust assets can be redistributed." I snapped a photo of that printout and sent it to Harold with a note. "This is the line they didn't manage to delete." Harold replied, short and calm, "Stay steady. You hold every legal advantage. They can't touch a single brick." I put my phone away and looked up. The sun had come out. Light bounced off the metal tabletop, and I remembered what Grant used to say. Sometimes the win isn't in striking back. It's in being prepared so thoroughly you can't be knocked down. I smiled. He'd like how I'm playing this one. In the afternoon, I called my two older friends, Jacob Stein and Naomi Chu. Jacob's a retired attorney who knows guardianship law inside out. Naomi's a therapist who's seen too many cases of family abuse. "I need you both at dinner in Westport tonight," I said. "You don't have to speak, just sit at the end of the table. Observe. If you see me look over and nod, Jacob, you'll FaceTime Harold. Naomi, you'll note demeanor and conduct as an informal social assessment. I need witnesses." Jacob was thoughtful. "Estelle, are you sure? This won't stay a small family matter." "I'm sure. They turned my name into gossip. I'll turn the truth into a verdict." Naomi smiled over the phone, voice soft as air. "You don't need to shout, Estelle. Truth has its own volume." I spent the rest of the afternoon writing a short note, not a will, just a last page to myself. If anyone asks why I didn't forgive, I'll say this. Forgiveness isn't erasing the offense, it's ending the offender's control. I don't need my son punished. I need him to see the cost of greed. I folded the note, tucked it into my journal, and closed it. At sunset, I put on my navy coat and the pearls Grant gave me and looked in the mirror. No tears. Just a 67-year-old woman walking into the final match of her life with the calm that only experience and pain can forge. Before I left, I checked my bag. Recorder. New will. Evidence timeline. Quinn Parks Lug. Investigative file. Dr. Lila Khan's report. And my phone with FaceTime set to Harold Benton at the top. I inhaled, turned off the lights, and locked the door. Outside, New York was lighting up. Cars glittered, crowds hurried by. No one knew that in a suburb an hour away, a family dinner would become a mother's quiet presentation of justice. I stepped out and called a car. Streetlights washed over my face in the rearview mirror, reflecting my steady eyes. No anger, no tears, only purposeful quiet, the quiet of someone holding the final move. I reached Westport half an hour early. The two-story house they'd bought mostly with my money now looked like a spread in a design magazine. Crystal chandelier, starched white linens, a vase of Dutch tulips centered on the dining table. They'd prepared well not to welcome a mother, but to stage a perfect family reunion. Tessa met me at the door, a trace of expensive perfume. She tilted her head, a thin smile, syrupy voice. "You're early, Mom. I wanted to surprise you." I answered lightly. "At my age, I'm done with surprises." "I prefer the truth." The housekeeper, the only truly neutral person there, hung my coat quickly. On the table, candles burned. The dishes were the fine china saved for special occasions. I sat, feeling the room glow like a set. Adrian came out of the kitchen with a tray of wine, trying to seem natural. "Red for you, Mom? I remember you like Bordeaux." I smiled faintly. "Right. Grant always bought it for our anniversaries." Tessa jumped in to keep the scene moving. "I remember you said this black dress makes you look more elegant than anything else." "I'm so glad you wore it tonight." I looked at her and smoothed the fabric. It was the dress I wore to Grant's funeral. "Yes, It sent your father off. I'm wearing it again to send off another part of my life." The table stilled. I sipped. The tannins grazed my tongue, bitter, clarifying. The main course passed under a pretend, cheerful hush. Weather talk, the neighborhood, any travel plans, Mom? Each question arranged like a choir. After dessert lemon cake with frosting, the kind Tessa knows I like, I set down my fork, dabbed my mouth, and stood. Candlelight slid over the black dress, glinting off the table. "Now," I said, each word clear, "it's my turn." Tessa smiled tight. "Oh, a speech? Wonderful, everyone." I raised a hand and cut in. "I won't be long, but I want you to hear me out." I placed a red envelope in the middle of the table. Tessa blinked. Adrian frowned. "This," I said, "is the cognitive and capacity evaluation from Dr. Lila Khan, a specialist recognized by federal courts. Conclusion: Mrs. Estelle is fully lucid, with complete capacity to manage finances and make legal decisions." No one spoke. I continued, "And this," I set down another stack, "is the buffer account statements, guardianship planning schedule, and the list of people you contacted to build social witnesses." I spoke slowly, evenly, without raising my voice. They all signed, and each believed they were helping a family care for a mother losing control. I've heard every call, read every email. "I know you started this right after Grant's funeral." Adrian sprang up. "Mom, I don't understand what you're talking about." I met his eyes. "You do. Because you discussed a soft guardianship plan with Attorney Kane. And Tessa, you emailed advisor Meryl Stone about preparing a lawful guardianship approach when Mom shows instability. I have the originals." Tessa went pale, voice shaking. Who made this up?" "This is a misunderstanding. We were only trying to protect you." I pulled out my phone and hit speaker. Harold Benton's voice came through, clear and cool. "This is Harold Benton, counsel to Mrs. Estelle Grant. Under Connecticut law, any deliberate fabrication of evidence to secure control over the assets of a competent adult constitutes legal fraud. Additionally, using an elderly person's assets without authorization is financial elder abuse, subject to criminal prosecution." Tessa went pale, lips pressed tight. Adrian stood frozen. I gently set the phone down. "Thank you, Harold. I'll call you back." Then I turned to them, my voice calm. "If you still think this is a misunderstanding, listen to this." I took a small recorder from my handbag and pressed play. Adrian's voice rang out clear, echoing through the quiet dining room. "Just sign it, Mom won't understand. If we wait, she might change her mind. Doing it on her birthday makes the most sense. She'll be soft." Then Tessa's voice, "Don't forget the trust if we don't get control of those assets soon. It'll be too late." A soft gasp came from the head of the table. "Maya." She set her spoon down, eyes wide, lips trembling. "Dad, Mom, why?" Owen's face went rigid as he stared at his parents like they were strangers. I stopped the recorder and looked down at the two of them. "Kids, the grown-up stuff isn't yours to carry. I know none of this is your fault. Remember, real love never needs to be hidden." I squeezed Maya's hand, then turned back to Adrian and Tessa. My voice stayed even, no shaking, no anger. In front of my grandchildren, I won't lower myself by yelling. But I do have a duty to spell out the consequences. I took out another thin file and set it on the table. These are the legal papers for the Westport house. The entire property belongs to the Grant Estelle Family Trust. I'm the trustee. You are guests, nothing more. The eviction packet is signed. The lawful move-out deadline is 14 days. Adrian stepped back, face drained. "You can't do this. This is my house." "No," I said softly. "This is the house of the woman you used to call Mom, the one who paid for everything, from your wedding to your children's tuition. Starting today, that mother stops being a bank. Tessa broke down, sobbing, trying to grab my hand. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was scared of losing everything. I didn't know it would go this far." I pulled my hand back and looked at her. Not angry anymore, just tired. "Tessa, if you were truly afraid of losing, you should have learned how to keep. But you didn't keep trust, and that's the one thing money can't buy back." The room fell dead silent. Only the small crackle of candle wicks and the wall clock counting seconds remained. I glanced at Jacob and Naomi, my two friends at the end of the table. They said nothing, just gave the slightest nod. I knew everything had been recorded, in full. I gathered the documents and put them in my bag. Before standing, I looked around the table and softened my voice. "I don't need you to be punished. I need you to understand that. Every action has a price. If you want to start over, live on your own 2 feet. If you choose the old path, then the law will teach you the rest." I paused, letting my eyes rest on Maya and Owen once more. "You two, Grandma will still be here if one day you need a place to come home to. Just not today." Then I turned and walked away without looking back. Outside, the Westport night air tasted faintly of salt. I stepped out feeling like I had closed a long chapter. Behind me, I heard Tessa's sobs and Adrian calling out, "Mom, please!" But I didn't stop. Moonlight spilled across the stone path, throwing a long, steady shadow of me. I knew they would never forget the image of the woman in a black dress walking out of the house that had been their symbol, red envelope in hand, head held high. And I knew that from that moment, I'd taken back my name, Estelle Grant. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. New York was cold and dry. Winter lights slanted through the crater. Blinds. I made tea, opened the window, and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like a void. It felt like space to be free. I'd spent the night writing the final lines in the packet for Harold not to hurt Adrian and Tessa, but to close a phase I'd enabled for too long. That afternoon, I drove back to Westport alone. The gates stood open. No laughter, no perfume like the night before. Just silence heavy and hollow. Adrian and Tessa sat on the sofa, faces drawn. I didn't circle around it. "I'm here to make things clear." I set the file on the table, my voice steady, not shaking. "Under the trust terms, you have 30 days to vacate the Westport house. This isn't punishment. It's putting everyone back in the right place. This home belongs to the Grant Estelle Family Trust, created to serve community funds and medical research, not something for anyone to cling to." Adrian lowered his head, hands clenched. "Mom, we know we fought. We're wrong. But the kids, their school." I nodded slightly. "I've accounted for that. I'll support Maya and Owen's tuition paid directly to the school, not through the parents. Their education won't be disrupted. But that's for them, not for you." Tessa looked up, eyes red. "Are you throwing our whole family out? We have nowhere else." "No," I said, still gentle but firm. "I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you 30 days to stand on your own feet." I pulled 2 envelopes from my bag. "These are career counselors Harold arranged. One specializes in re-entry for women who've been out of the workforce, Tessa. Contact her. And this is a list of open project management roles around Stamford that fit Adrian's background. You can both start over if you're willing to relearn how to work." Tessa's voice shook. "You don't understand. We were just trying to help you, so you wouldn't be tricked by others." I gave a fawn. Small, wry smile, no bitterness, only the sour truth. "Help? By pushing guardianship papers? By hiring people to spin a story that I'm out of control? Listen, help is a right to give, not a tribute you're entitled to collect. I've let you forget that for too long." The room sank back into silence. Only the clock ticked, as if measuring out the beats of my patience. I opened another file and set it down. "This is my new will. I'm saying it now to avoid any misunderstanding later. The entire estate house, stocks, savings, investment funds totaling $50 million will go to education, healthcare, and scholarship funds under the Grant Foundation. Your father's legacy and mine will serve those who truly need help, not those planning to take it. Adrian lifted his head, eyes shining. Mom, you're not leaving anything to me? I looked at my son, the baby I held when he was only hours old, the boy I soothed in the dark, the man whose early debts I paid, and said quietly, I'm leaving you more than money. I'm leaving you the chance to start over. If you use it, that's the greatest inheritance I can give. Tears rolled down Adrian's face, but I knew it wasn't just loss. It was the first time in his life he'd be responsible for himself. I turned to the study table where Maya and Owen sat silent. They didn't speak, but I saw fear in their eyes, the kind kids feel when they realize adults aren't perfect. I went over and sat at their level. Kids, Grandma has a little gift just for you. I took out 2 small envelopes. Inside are a letter from me, city library cards, and a list of free community activities, places I'd like you to try this summer. You'll meet people who teach by doing, not by talking. Maya looked at me and whispered, Grandma, you won't be mad at my mom and dad, right? No, I'm not mad. But I won't hide the truth anymore. Adults have to relearn how to live. Right, and you just keep learning to be kind. I hugged them both lightly, felt their quick breaths against my shoulder. Then I stood and faced Adrian. Son, hear me one last time. You can lose my money, but don't lose being a father. The kids need a guide, not an excuse maker. They don't need wealth, they need example. Start there. Adrian bowed his head, hands over his face. Tessa sat in silence. I looked around the room one last time. Everything was in place, the beige sofa, the wedding photo, the slightly crooked oil painting, but the warmth of family was gone. I'll have someone inspect the house after you move out. Don't worry, I'm not taking back anything except the truth. Tessa burst into tears, her sobs cracking the air. Mom, do you think you could ever forgive me? I answered slowly, without dodging it. Forgiveness, Tessa, doesn't mean going back. Forgiveness is when I no longer let pain run my life. If you truly regret it, show it with actions. She nodded and covered her face. Adrian stared out the window at the bare winter maples. I walked to the door. The cold air bit my skin, but I could breathe. Before leaving, I turned back. Harold will reach out to guide you through the move-out process. And don't think about lawsuits or spreading rumors. Every piece of evidence is saved. With one call, I'll file criminal charges. No one answered. I knew they understood. I stepped down the porch. Thin sunlight hit the pavers. The breeze carried a far-off salt smell. I got in the car but didn't start it yet. I looked in the rearview mirror. The door closed behind me, quiet. Inside, they were probably crying, falling apart, but to me, it wasn't the sound of pain anymore. It was the sound of illusions cracking. Merging onto the highway, I saw the sign, New York 60 miles. I let out a small laugh. 60 miles, but the distance between a mother once exploited and a woman now free. I touched the pearls Grant gave me and whispered, Do you see, love? I finally did it. No hatred, no selling my soul, just letting go at the right time. Headlights ahead strung together like stars. Peace settled in my chest. No more begging calls, no more demanding texts, no more staged family dinners, just a little jazz and an open road. From now on, if anyone asks, Mrs. Estelle, do you have regrets? I'll smile and say, no. I only regret not doing this sooner. I lowered the window and let the wind wash over my face, clean and bright. Behind me, Westport faded into dusk. Ahead, the city lit up, and I, Estelle Grant, was truly free for the first time in years. A week after the dessert night, Westport felt like someone had flipped a switch to quiet. But at the country club, the wood-floored corridor still buzzed. I didn't go. I only needed Marjorie. She called me Tuesday afternoon, gleeful like she'd just watched a final curtain drop. Estelle, you didn't have to do a thing. Dr. Khan's evaluation accidentally landed in the club's shared inbox official copy, seal, and wet signature. Anyone who whispered unstable got shut down on the spot. They changed the topic faster than swapping tennis shoes. I laughed, not a victory laugh, a relieved one. When the truth comes with documents, it walks itself where it needs to go. I just said, "Thank you, Marjorie," and poured more tea. Late sunlight slipped through the blinds, painting pale gold rectangles on the wall. That evening, I signed a stack of letters Harold drafted to the social witnesses, the yoga coach, the event coordinator, a few gym acquaintances. Each letter was polite and direct, reminding them that repeating false claims about someone's mental capacity can be defamation. That adding a line at someone's urging to support a fraudulent guardianship could be aiding and abetting. No insults, no heat, just statute names, section numbers, and Harold Benton's firm signature. Thursday morning, Harold called. Eviction complete. The locksmith changed the locks at 7:30 a.m. The inventory log is signed by witnesses. Adrian and Tessa's belongings are sealed and moved to storage for a month per regulations. You don't need to appear. I stood at the window, watching a thin cloud cut across the sky. Strange how, when the boundary is clear, your mind feels rinsed clean. That night, I opened the first transfer files for the Estelle and Grant Foundation, seed money, and a 10-year funding plan for 3 tracks: secondary and college scholarships, community clinics, and programs to prevent financial abuse of the elderly. I signed with a steady hand even I didn't expect. Grant used to say, "Money is like water. Either you let it stagnate or you channel it where people need the cool." I chose the latter. The next day, I stopped by Dr. Lila Khan's clinic just to say thank you, even though I knew she was busy. The waiting room still smelled faintly of freshly sharpened pencils. Dr. Khan shook my hand, eyes sharp yet kind. "I only did my job, Mrs. Estelle." "You did more," I said. "You handed me a mirror to see myself clearly." She smiled. "Boundaries are vitamins for a late-blooming mind. Once you set them, your brain stops burning energy on fear and uses it for clarity." I carried that line home like a mint under my tongue. Cool, clean, steady. The last piece was Maya and Owen. I wouldn't let them become couriers for adult emotion. I booked a schedule with family therapist Dr. Naomi Chu, fixed calls every Sunday at 5 p.m., routed through her office. There, every conversation would be neutrally noted, no interruptions, no one standing behind to coach lines. I texted Maya, "Sunday, 5 p.m., I'll be there." She sent a smiley, then a drawing, a paper boat floating on blue marker water, the word Grandma on the sail. Owen sent 3 basketballs and Baforty. "Okay." I laughed. Kids somehow say exactly what's needed without many words. Then came the cleaning not of the house, but of my circle. I made one small rule. If a distant relative text starts with, "This is small," or "Aunt Estelle, I'm short for a few days," I don't reply right away. I let 24 hours pass. If it still feels like a demand rather than sharing, I don't reply at all. I call it cutting out convenient toxins. The things that wear you down aren't the punches, they're the daily pats on the shoulder asking you to give a little, then a little more. Each night, I wrote a gratitude log. 3 things, nothing grand. A cup of tea brewed just right, a cool breeze through the small window, a stranger holding the elevator door. After 10 nights, I realized the wound wasn't seeping anymore. It had skinned over not because I forgot, but because I put it in the right box. On the weekend, I opened Grant's closet. The familiar masculine scent had faded, leaving touchable memories. Wool lapels, silver cufflinks, the wine-colored silk scarf he only wore at Christmas. I kept a few things: the watch with a scuffed bezel, a crinkled jazz ticket in a coat pocket. The rest I had appraised for auction, with every dollar earmarked for the foundation. People call it giving away. To me, it was letting those things continue their journey. Sunday evening, I stood in the kitchen. No pots clattering for a family dinner like before. The kitchen was quiet, and I smiled, quiet but not lonely. Loneliness is being abandoned in a crowd. Now I stood alone and felt close to myself. The club gossip died like a flame splashed with water. Once instability was replaced by a clean bill of mental health, everyone pivoted to weather, Court 3's turf, and the upcoming ball. People are like that. If the topic no longer lets them feel right by gossiping, they move on. Marjorie said, "Let them. We live." I nodded. We live. Harold sent a long procedural summary. Locks changed, belongings sealed by the book, third-party storage receipt signed, a no trespass notice to Adrian and Tessa, plus clauses for complaint mediation arbitration tight as a net. I read it through and filed it in the top drawer, the one I only opened to remind myself that today's piece was built on clear lines. At the first Sunday call, Maya showed up first, Naomi's office in the background. She talked about an essay on a quiet hero, hesitated, then asked, "Grandma, do quiet heroes always forgive?" I thought a few seconds. No, quiet heroes set limits. Forgiveness means not letting hate burn you up. Limits mean not letting anyone burn you again. Maya nodded and smiled. Owen popped in late, held up his basketball, and bragged about free throws. "Good," I said. "If you keep discipline on the court, you'll keep it off the court." Naomi smiled in the corner and jotted notes. She was helping me build a small bridge across the age gap so the kids could cross without stepping into adult mud. Another night, a text from an unknown number. "Miss Estelle, I'm a cousin on your mother's side. I heard that you—" I looked at it and put the phone down. 24-hour rule. The next morning, I deleted it, not out of harshness, but because I've learned any tiny gap becomes a path for others' needs to seep in and erode your own. I swapped out the yellowed curtains and the too-dim bulb in the kitchen corner. I bought a few blue hydrangeas and set them in the Savannah porcelain vase Grant once brought home. I put on old jazz Ella Fitzgerald singing Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, her voice like silk through the room. The kitchen was still quiet, but now it was warm, because it was mine, not someone's stage. On the weekend, Marjorie and I walked the park. The wind flipped leaves. The sky looked like a white sheet hung in the sun. She teased, "Do you think people are afraid of you now?" I said. "I hope it's respect instead. Fear fades fast. Respect, if built from clear boundaries and conditional kindness, lasts like paving stones." On the way back, I stopped at a used bookstore and bought a new leather journal. I had 4 words embossed on the cover: boundaries and gratitude. Each day I'd write 2 columns, what I said no to and what I said thank you for. 2 simple rails for the train of my heart to run straight. Night fell. I dimmed the lights, leaving a warm pool on the table. I set Grant's photo in the center, his head tipped in a sun-crinkled smile. I poured a little red wine and lifted my glass to the air. "Grant, hear me? The rumor's gone. The boundaries are bright. I'm no longer the good mom who wears herself down. I'm Estelle, the woman who knows what to keep and what to release." Outside, the city hummed, but in this kitchen, the quiet wasn't a pit, it was a lake, smooth, deep, reflecting my face as it is, not warped by the need to be loved at any cost. I set the glass down, pulled out the journal, and wrote, "Today I said no to a roundabout money text. Today I said thank you for a 30-minute call with Maya's real laughter, and thank you for a quiet kitchen, quiet but not lonely." I closed the book. A chapter ended without fireworks. Just a line drawn bold and straight, one no one gets to erase with tears. I turned off the lights. In the soft dark, I heard my heart tapping a normal beat like any heart no longer bewildered. And I knew, from here on, I'm living the rest of my life on ground that is mine. The following spring, I got a short text from Adrian. "Mom, may I see you?" Alone. No fancy restaurant, no glossy cafe like before, just a small shop in Brooklyn where I used to take him for sandwiches when he was little. I arrived on time. Adrian was already seated, no suit, no tie, no luxury car at the curb. Just a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, eyes direct and tired. "I'm not here to talk about money, Mom," he began, voice hoarse like someone just out of a storm. "I just want to talk." I nodded. "Then talk." He went quiet for a few seconds, then exhaled. "I've spent my whole life protecting that all-set image. I was scared of losing the house, scared of losing status, scared my friends would find out I wasn't the Grant heir anymore. But when everything collapsed, I saw I didn't really keep anything. I let Tessa lead, and I was weak. I don't know how to be a father anymore, Mom." I looked at my son, the man who once thought he was the strongest in the family, now speaking honestly, without a shell. No excuses, no blame, just bare responsibility. I said gently, "If you want to start over, I'll listen. But you know this help isn't unconditional anymore. I have 3 conditions." He nodded. "First," I said, "you need stable work for at least 6 months, no borrowing, no asking for help. Second, both of you must attend family counseling with an independent professional, and you don't get to quit halfway. And third, you owe a public apology, not just to me, but to everyone you let those rumors hurt." Adrian lowered his head, eyes wet. "I agree. Can you trust me this time?" "I don't need to trust," I said. "I just need you to do." 2 weeks later, an email from Tessa landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple: apology. The letter was long, more than 1,000 words. Apologies line by line, explanations about pressure, fear, pride. I read it all, neither angry nor moved. I replied in 4 lines. "Tessa, thank you for writing. I don't need words, I need actions. Get real work. Stop posting borrowed images of a life, and let the kids see their parents no longer hiding behind gloss. When that happens, I'll know you're changing." 3 days later, Harold sent confirmation that tuition had been paid for a client relations and event organization course at Norwalk Community College. The payer was me, but the recipient was the school. I wasn't handing Tessa cash. I was investing in a real chance. Adrian started at a mid-sized project management firm, making about 1/10 of his old income, but enough to live on. And Tessa, once only used to high heels, learned to stand 8 hours in a conference hall, handle clients, and reset rows of chairs. I didn't interfere. I watched quietly from a distance through brief texts to Maya. "Your dad's home late, learning to cook. Your mom's turning an early class in the morning." I understood. Making amends doesn't need a stage, just a small kitchen and a pot of soup simmering. In the summer, Adrian moved no more Westport Mansion, but a small rental apartment near the kids' school. I helped not with my hands, but with a nod of approval. 2 bedrooms, low ceilings, a balcony facing the train tracks but clean and bright. Tessa hung pale green curtains. Maya set a little vase of flowers. "You know," I told Adrian, "small homes often hold the big conversations." He smiled genuinely, for the first time. In September, I received a printed photo in a white envelope. No signature, no note, just Maya in a blue dress holding a violin on the school grounds, and Owen mid-free throw, mouth wide in a grin. On the back, someone had written in pencil, "Ordinary life can be far more beautiful." I keep the photo in a silver frame on my desk. Every morning when I make tea, I look at it, a reminder that ordinary doesn't mean less, it means right-sized. 6 months later, I called Harold. "I want to set up a small scholarship in the kids' names, the Maya and Owen Grant Scholarship. Each year, it will award students with strong attendance and at least 20 hours of community service. Harold asked. Any conditions for the children's parents? I smiled. No, they already have their own condition, to watch their kids grow up in a healthy environment. That's a reward bigger than any check. That night, I opened my gratitude journal. First entry: I'm grateful my son learned how to apologize without excuses. Second, grateful Tessa stopped putting makeup on her fear. Third, grateful I kept my word, no return to a living stipend, only support for education and therapy. I call it helping without binding. In November, I attended Maya's school concert. I sat in the back row. Nobody noticed me. When the piece ended, she bowed and her eyes met mine for a split second. That look, it wasn't a child trapped in an adult war. It was a spirit free to love both sides without choosing. After the concert, Adrian came over, not much talk. Just, I've done the 6 months. Work steady, counseling regular, no debt. Mom, are you proud of me yet? I touched his shoulder. No need to be proud. I just feel at peace. He smiled slightly. Me too. Tessa stood a few steps away, not intruding, but her eyes no longer had the old calculating sheen. They were gentle, tired, and real. Sometimes the best thing a person can do is be tired at the right time so they finally stop. Back home, I poured a glass of wine and opened the window. Outside, the first snow of the season was falling. I thought about the path from that cold chocolate mousse on my 67th birthday to tonight, when I know love can return if it's taught to stand up straight. I remembered Dr. Khan's line from our last visit. Some children aren't bad, they've just never been loved the right way, and sometimes loving them right means stopping the funding. I get it now. Boundaries, kept long enough, turn into a way of life, and from that way of life, respect sprouts. That night I wrote in my journal, "Today I said no to pity. Today I said thank you for life patiently," reteaching my son. Today I learned that boundaries, when sown with love, still bloom into flowers. I closed the book and turned off the light, the glow catching the frame of Maya and Owen. I thought that maybe making amends isn't about begging forgiveness, it's about living decently long enough for someone to believe you really understand. And in that moment I smiled, knowing every final exam once passed becomes a new beginning. A year later, my kitchen smelled like orange blossom tea again. I tied on an old apron, opened the oven, and carefully slid in a tray of chocolate mousse cake. Same cake as that year, but this time, not for anyone else, for me. Warmth spilled out, mixing with the soft March wind tapping the window. Chocolate drifted through the room, sweet but not sharp, like my heart now, no longer boiling, just warm. The Estelle and Grant Foundation entered its first year of operation. The first round of scholarships went to 10 students in medicine and community education, and we opened the first clinic Grant Community Health Center in Brooklyn. I didn't cut a ribbon. I stood back in the crowd, looking at Grant's name etched in bright steel. Something in me felt both heavy and light, as if, at last, our life had paid back its finest debt to the world. I didn't expect Adrian to show up. He stood in the back, alone, no suit, no forced smile. When people thinned out, he came over, hands in his pockets, voice low but clear. "Mom, I'm sorry. No performance, no excuses." I was wrong. I looked at my son, the man who once treated apologizing like a stain, now bowing the right way. I didn't rush to hug him. I set a hand on his shoulder and said quietly, "Growing up is about paying a price, not getting revenge. You're on the right road." He nodded. In his eyes, I saw a light I'd once seen in Grant's, the light of someone who fell and stood back up. That afternoon, Tessa came too. No expensive bouquet, no heavy perfume. Just a business card. Tessa Grant, Event Coordinator, Norwalk Center. Her voice was lower, steady. "I've closed all the credit cards. I'm learning to live on a real paycheck." I looked at the woman who, to me, had been a symbol of vanity, now standing with tired honesty. I didn't say much. Good. I nodded. Only when you stop borrowing from someone else's future can you start building your own present. She dipped her head. I saw her lip tremble not to play a part. For the first time, I believed she was actually living, not acting. That evening, I invited the family for a small dinner. No champagne, no white tablecloth, no fussy European courses. Just pumpkin soup, crisp toast, and the chocolate mousse I'd made. Maya brought her violin and played a slow Clair de Lune, and Owen told how his team won the regional tournament. No one talked about money. No one brought up blame. We just sat together. For the first time in years, I felt I wasn't the host, and I wasn't the audience. I was simply present, whole, and calm. Late at night, after everyone left, I sat at the table and wrote one last letter to Grant. My love, I've learned to say no, not out of anger, but to protect the part of me that hasn't broken. I understand now, when we know our limits, our love doesn't shrink, it reaches farther. Our love isn't only in the old apartment or the savings account anymore. It's being portioned into scholarships, clinics, and children. We don't know who carry the dreams you believed in. I stopped trying to be the good mom who erases herself and started being a good person, the real kind. Thank you for teaching me how to be strong without being bitter. I'm free now, a freedom with responsibility. I folded the letter and placed it in the wooden box with Grant's old watch. A closing ritual, light as a breath. On New Year's Eve, I wrote the year-end lines in my journal. Freedom doesn't come from having or not having money. Freedom comes when we can draw boundaries and still keep gratitude. Rich or poor, love or hurt gratitude is the only currency that can hold a family together. I closed the book. Warm kitchen light washed the wall, reflecting the years gone by. I stood, turned off the stove, and opened the window. The city breathed with me, each gust like a heartbeat waking up. No demands, no fear, just the real warmth of the present. I poured a little more orange blossom tea and smiled to myself. A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything: my child, my family, my love. But it turns out only when the false things fall away do we make room for what's real. I touched Grant's photo, then looked out the window at New York, the sky turning bronze in a spring sunset. And in that light, I heard my own voice, steady and calm. My name is Estelle Grant. I'm 68. I'm no longer afraid of being alone, because I know people who I know how to love themselves are never truly alone. Thank you for staying with me to the end of my story. I'm curious, what city are you listening from? From a bright kitchen in New York, or from some quiet corner of the world? If this story touched something in you or brought to mind someone who loved but didn't know how to hold on, leave a comment below. Every share is a way to tell each other, I understand, and you're not alone. And if you want to walk with me into the next chapters where we talk about aging, awakening, and the slow rebirths of the heart, tap like, subscribe, or simply stay here a little longer. I'm grateful you're here, because somewhere in this noisy city, we can still listen to one another with a story and a heart that's still warm.